Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Debbie Lynn Randall. Debbie Lynn Randall was born on August 21, 1962, in Marietta, Georgia, to a loving family with two older brothers. Her parents divorced when she was young. Her mother later married a man named Roy, who became Debbie's stepfather. The family lived in a small apartment building. Debbie was a cheerful and sociable child. On the evening of January 13, 1972, after dinner with her family, Debbie went to the laundromat to supervise the laundry. Debbie's home was just a short distance from the laundromat, so her mother wasn't overly concerned about her safety when she was sent to do the laundry. The original plan was for Debbie to go with her brother, but he was feeling unwell, so Debbie's mother sent her husband to pick up the laundry and Debbie went with her stepfather, holding a box of laundry detergent. At the laundromat, Roy put the clothes in two washing machines and left, leaving Debbie waiting for the cycle to finish. After the wash, Debbie had to walk home and ask someone to pick up her clean clothes because she couldn't carry them herself. However, when the laundry should have been finished and Debbie still hadn't returned, her mother began to feel uneasy. It was getting dark outside, so she and her husband decided to walk to the laundromat to look for Debbie, but she was nowhere to be found. The employee informed them that Debbie had left the laundromat some time ago and had not returned. The news worried her mother, who began searching the surrounding streets with Roy. As they walked, they discovered a suspicious scene. A short distance from the laundromat, in the parking lot next to a car, there was a spilled detergent. Since Debbie had brought a box of detergent with her, her mother suspected that it might be hers. Despite expanding their search to the entire parking lot and the surrounding area, they found no other sign of Debbie. Neighbors who knew the family joined in the search. Debbie's mother decided to call the police for help. The police investigated the parking lot and discovered their first clue: spilled laundry detergent just inches from a parked car, and on the car door, they found several clear fingerprints. The police found fresh fingerprints on the car that were located lower than the handle, which seemed unusual. They suspected that an unknown person might have grabbed the girl while touching the car at this spot. The officers collected the fingerprints and sent them to forensic experts for analysis. They also started searching for the car's owner to confirm whether the fingerprints belonged to them. With no other leads, the police began a thorough search of the area, looking for new clues or witnesses. The laundry worker reported that she did not see anything suspicious. Debbie had waited for the laundry to finish, then left the building with the detergent box. It is possible that she went home to ask someone to pick up her clothes. Police discovered the first key witness, 12-year-old Sandra, who said that as she and her friend walked to a laundromat to drop off dirty clothes, they saw a man grab a girl on the street, drag her to his car parked near the laundromat, and drive away quickly while she screamed for help. Sandra and her friend were lucky to avoid the man's car. Debbie screamed in a car, but he did not slow down. At the time, Sandra did not consider what she saw to be a kidnapping. She assumed the man was a family member who had come to pick Debbie up, possibly against her will. So Sandra did not report the incident to the authorities or tell any adults about it. After learning about Debbie's disappearance, Sandra provided essential details to investigators. She described the abductor's vehicle as a dark-colored, likely 1957 model pickup truck. She also described the man as young, white, with thick dark hair, wearing a white t-shirt, jeans, and black work boots. Another key witness, a girl who lived in the same building as Debbie, shared her observations. She saw a dark-colored pickup truck drive past the apartment building on the evening in question. The girl initially thought the driver of the car was her uncle, but when he stopped in front of her and looked at her, she realized it was someone else. She described the driver as a white man with medium-length dark hair and provided additional details about his appearance. She also reported that he parked his car near their building, next to the same car where a detergent spill would later be discovered. Another witness, a man who lived near the girl's home, reported that a dark-colored pickup truck, possibly a Dodge, almost hit him while he was driving to visit his wife in the hospital. The driver appeared to be in his 30s with dark hair, and the witness saw a girl in the car trying to escape while the driver held her with one arm. Based on these accounts, the police believed Debbie had been kidnapped. They circulated the suspect's vehicle to all patrol units and created a composite sketch of the driver based on descriptions from witnesses. Some officers searched for similar vehicles and checked their owners, while others conducted a wide-ranging search for the girl. As the days passed, more volunteers and police from surrounding towns joined the search. Police questioned Debbie's family, and after investigation, they were all cleared as potential suspects. Debbie's biological father, who lived in the same city, was notified of her disappearance at work and immediately joined the search effort. Police also ran background checks on convicted criminals who lived near Debbie's home, but none of them appeared to be viable suspects. The search for Debbie continued for over 2 weeks without any significant leads. It wasn't until January 29th, when a group of students joined the search teams, that a breakthrough occurred. The students were sent to search a wooded area several miles from Debbie's house. After nearly 5 hours of searching, one of the students noticed a set of tracks on the ground that led from the trail into the forest, suggesting that something had been dragged into the woods. As they followed the trail about 150 feet into the woods, they discovered a human body and immediately contacted the police. Upon further inspection, they quickly identified the body as Debbie Randall. She was wearing the same outfit her mother had described on the day she went missing. However, her shoes were missing. The medical examination of Debbie's body revealed that she had been strangled to death and had also been sexually assaulted. A single dark hair was found on her body, which was likely to belong to the killer. Although DNA analysis was not available at the time, experts were able to examine the hair under a microscope and estimate that it came from a man between the ages of 18 and 30. The investigation then focused on the victim's clothing, which was covered in soil. Police enlisted the help of a geologist to analyze the soil, along with a forensic team. They discovered that some of the soil contained a type of soil mined less than 10 miles from their town called North Georgia clay. However, other stains on the clothing were found to be from a different type of clay, mined by a company just 2 miles from where the body was found. Police theorized that the perpetrator did not kill Debbie immediately, but rather drove her to remote areas, sexually assaulting her in one location and killing her in another, before finally dumping her body in the woods. Police believe the killer may have been hired by one of the nearby mining companies. After contacting these companies, the police searched the employees of both companies but did not find the suspect or the vehicle described by the victims. Furthermore, they found fingerprints near the abduction site, but unfortunately, when these fingerprints were compared to the suspects, there was no match. Debbie's death sent shockwaves through the city, with thousands attending her funeral. Police repeatedly ran into roadblocks in their search for clues. Police officer Morris Nix investigated many suspects and eventually narrowed the list down to 4 people. For Morris Nix, Debbie's murder remained a top priority throughout his career. The case took a breakthrough with the creation of the FBI's DNA database. Experts successfully extracted a genetic profile from hair found on Debbie's body, which was then entered into the database. However, no matches were found. In 2015, 43 years after the murder, police reopened the case and decided to re-examine the victim's clothing using modern technology. The clothing had been stored in an evidence vault since the crime. When re-examined, some of the evidence had degraded over time, resulting in only a partial DNA profile. In 2018, Debbie's mother gave an interview, expressing her hope that her daughter's killer would be found. After the tragedy, she found it unbearable to stay in their apartment, so she moved to another city. Her only wish was for the case to be solved before she died. Sadly, she died of cancer at the age of 78, just weeks after the interview, and was buried next to Debbie. In 2019, the local police department received additional funding, which allowed them to conduct a more thorough analysis of Debbie's clothing. This time, experts successfully extracted a full DNA sample, but unfortunately, the perpetrator's DNA was still not found in the FBI database. Debbie's father was interviewed and shared that he thought about his daughter every day for decades. Sadly, he passed away in 2022, shortly after the interview. Police turned their attention to the first piece of evidence they had: DNA. They partnered with a Florida company that specializes in an advanced DNA analysis technique called genomics. Police provided the company with all the biological samples they had collected over the years and waited for the results. Experts created a DNA profile of the suspect and began searching for his relatives in public genetic databases. After analyzing thousands of potential relatives of the killer, investigators narrowed their search to a family in Marietta. In 2023, police asked the family to provide a DNA sample, which they agreed to. Analysis showed that the killer was indeed a close relative of the family. Experts re-examined the family tree and quickly identified a man named William Rose. However, William Rose committed suicide in 1974, just 2 years after Debbie's murder. Police obtained a warrant to exhume William Rose's remains and took a sample of William Rose's DNA for analysis. 51 years after Debbie's murder, police finally identified William Rose as the killer. At the time of the murder, William Rose, 24, lived in the same building as Debbie's family, and he visited them frequently. The case has finally been solved. Debbie's brother, Melvin, is the only living relative. Melvin attended a press conference and expressed gratitude to everyone involved in solving the case that lasted more than 50 years. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Jake Wagner. Hannah Mae Roden, 13, and Edward Jake Wagner, 18, met at a dance and quickly became lovers. As a result, the Roden and Wagner families began to spend time together, sharing weekends and parties, and Hannah Mae and Jake's love continued to grow. When Hannah Mae turned 15 years old, she revealed that she was pregnant. Jake was delighted with the news and hoped his family would be too. The Wagner family placed great emphasis on tradition and family lineage, and they adored children, viewing them as a continuation of their traditions. In fact, they often passed the name down from generation to generation, as seen in Jake's family, with his father being George Wagner III and his brother George Wagner IV. On the other hand, the Roden family had a more practical approach to family life. Even though they were divorced, Christopher Roden Sr. and Dana Roden remained close and devoted to their 3 children, prioritizing their happiness above all else. Unlike the Wagner family, the Rodens lived modestly, with Christopher working odd jobs and Dana as a nurse's assistant. Despite economic limitations, the Roden family instilled strong traditional values in their children, including Christopher Jr., Hannah Mae, and Clarence, Frankie. The family was overjoyed when Hannah Mae gave birth to a daughter named Sophie, and they threw a big party. However, when Jake asked Hannah Mae to move in with him and his family, she refused. She became increasingly wary of Jake due to his increasingly controlling and aggressive behavior. Hannah Mae was initially attracted to Jake's caring and thoughtful nature, but over time, she realized that Jake was trying to limit her independence. Jake's aggression repeatedly caused Hannah Mae's feelings for him to cool. Her refusal to move in with Jake created tension with him. Jake believed that Hannah Mae was preventing Sophie from growing up in a safe and healthy environment. Despite Hannah Mae's denials, Jake became increasingly controlling. Hannah Mae finally ended the relationship in March 2015, tired of Jake's aggressive behavior. At that point, the Wagner family wanted sole custody of Sophie. Jake had to put in a lot of effort to convince Hannah May to sign over custody of the children to him and his brother. However, Hannah May refused. In a heated exchange, Jake angrily sent a text message saying that if necessary, he would use force to gain custody of Sophie. This revelation confirmed the Wagner family's willingness to use coercion and intimidation to achieve their goals. To protect herself and her daughter from this unscrupulous family, Hannah decided to distance herself and raise her child alone. She chose to work as a nursing assistant, continued her studies, and took care of Sophie herself. The situation escalated when Hannah became pregnant again. Although Hannah confirmed that the child was not Jake's, he still had doubts and tried to discover the truth. In December 2015, Jake logged into Hannah's social media accounts but found no evidence of an affair. A trial ensued, involving repeated interactions between the Wagner family and Hannah. In one text message, Hannah asserted that the Wagner family would have to get rid of her before they could gain custody of Sophie. Jake shared this letter with his family, angering them. His grandmother, Rita Newcomb, 65, retaliated by forging an important custody-related document. During the custody trial for Sophie, Christopher Roden and George Wagner, 3, had a heated argument. This incident caused a complete rift in the relationship between the two families. The Wagner family soon came up with a terrible idea. They believed that Hannah Roden was uncooperative and decided that the only solution was to eliminate her and the entire Roden family in order to gain custody of Sophie. By Christmas 2016, this twisted idea was the start of a terrible crime. While everyone focused on love and celebration during the holiday season, the Wagner family had other intentions. They held a family vote to decide whether to continue with their evil plan or not. After everyone agreed, they assigned each person roles and began preparing. The Wagner family spent 5 months researching the Roden family home, including surveillance cameras, daily habits, and work schedules of each Roden family member. Each member of the Wagner family was assigned a specific task. Angela Wagner purchased a communications blocking device and planned to secretly install it on the Roden family's phone to prevent anyone from being able to contact the police. George Wagner, 3, offered to build a homemade silencer and handle transportation the night of the crime, securing a truck and not attracting attention. Meanwhile, Sophie was safe at home with Angela because the court had awarded Hannah and Jake joint custody of Sophie. The Wagner family chose the time when it was their turn to care for Sophie in order to keep Sophie safe. It was clear that the Wagner family had meticulously planned every detail to carry out a perfect execution. At approximately 8 a.m. on April 22, 2016, George Wagner, 3, visited Christopher Roden under the pretense of offering Christopher a job opportunity that could improve his family's financial situation. However, the job offer was just an excuse to get into the house. A moment later, Christopher Roden Sr. opened the door. A while later, as usual, Bobby Jo Manley arrived at Christopher's house to take care of the Roden family's animals. While outside the house, she noticed someone was inside, which was unusual for that time of day. Every member of the Roden family usually went about their work and was not at home. However, when she entered the house, she found Christopher and his cousin Gary, 38, lying in a pool of blood. Horrified, Bobby grabbed the phone and called emergency services, reporting what she had seen and asking for assistance. Still shaking, Bobby went to other relatives' houses and knocked loudly on one of their doors. A 3-year-old boy, the son of Clarence, Frankie Roden, appeared, and Bobby asked him where his parents were. However, the boy did not respond but just pointed towards the bed. When she entered the house, she witnessed another horrifying scene. Clarence and his wife, Hannah Hazel, lay motionless. Lying between them was their 6-month-old baby, still alive but covered in the blood of Clarence and Hannah Hazel. After Bobby's 911 call, police quickly arrived on the scene. As the officers approached the Roden property, a neighbor intervened, sensing worried. He requested that the officers check 2 additional addresses of family members. His concern was justified, as police found bloodied bodies in the 3rd house. The victims were identified as Dana, 19-year-old Hannah Mae, and 16-year-old Christopher Jr. The attackers had spared Hannah's youngest child, a baby girl only a few days old. Later, another victim was discovered, 44-year-old Kenneth, the elder Roden's brother, who lived a 15-minute walk from the others. By 2 p.m., 8 victims had been identified: Christopher Sr., Dana, Clarence, Hannah Hazel, Christopher Jr., Hannah Mae, Kenneth, and Gary. The only survivors were young children, a 3-year-old, a 6-month-old and a 4-day-old newborn, along with 2-year-old Sophie, who was at the Wagner home at the time of the incident. After examining the bodies, police concluded that all the victims had been killed in their sleep by gunshot wounds. Detectives later reconstructed the events of that day. Christopher Sr. was awake when the attackers burst into the house, as evidenced by a wound on his right arm. Christopher Sr. attempted to defend himself but was hit with 9 shots to the head, torso, and limbs. In addition, 5 bullets were removed from Dana Roden's neck and head. The rest of the family died from gunshot wounds to the head. Gary was shot 5 times, Christopher Jr. 4 times, Clarence and his wife Hannah Hazel 3 times each, and Hannah Mae twice. Kenneth was the only one shot once. In total, the assailant fired 32 shots, with some shots fired after the victims were already dead. Some bodies also showed signs of physical abuse. Since no one in the area heard anything, investigators believe the perpetrators used silencers, indicating a carefully planned and executed act. It was clear that the victims were targeted, and someone wanted revenge on the entire Roden family. During the search, police found 5 Remington shell casings of different types and an unused bullet from a different gun model. The scale of the case shows that this was a case with multiple murderers. Leonard Manley, Dana's father, claimed that the criminals must have known the family well, or the dogs would have been barking loudly. The question of who committed this act kept police officers busy. The Attorney General's office provided over $20,000 for the Roden family's funeral. Roden family were buried in several stages. On April 28, 2016, Gary was the first to be laid to rest in South Shore, Kentucky. Hannah Hazel's funeral followed on May 1 in the village of Atway, Coteau County, Ohio. The remaining members were buried on May 3 in West Portsmouth, in the same county. Many local residents attended to pay their respects to the family. The surviving children were placed in the care of relatives. The neighborhood was gripped by fear. Police advised relatives of the victims to take precautions and warned all residents of Pike to stay their homes at night. The brutal mass murder outraged residents across the state, who demanded that the investigation's findings be made public and the perpetrators be caught as soon as possible. As part of the investigation, the murdered family's 3 homes had been investigated, followed by several more vehicles the following day. Forensic experts had participated in the investigation and had meticulously examined the homes, but no DNA evidence of the suspects had been found in any of the homes. Cameras had been installed in the houses, but they had not provided any useful information because they had been disabled. It seemed the culprit had planned every detail carefully, leaving no clues behind. However, detectives eventually discovered a key piece of evidence that had helped solve the case. An important detail was that marijuana plants were discovered at 3 crime scenes. At one location, around 200 plants were found. The police believed the cannabis was grown for sale rather than personal use. This led to speculation about the involvement of Mexican drug traffickers. However, the amount of cannabis found was too small to suggest an attack by an entire cartel. In January 2017, a close relative of the Roden family was arrested for drug trafficking. This was considered a coincidental circumstance. Leonard Manley stated that his daughter, Dana, had no involvement with the cannabis operations. Some family members confirmed that the older brothers, Christopher and Kenneth Roden, grew marijuana, but they were unaware of any large-scale cultivation. Specialized equipment for breeding chickens for fighting, as well as cages with roosters, were found at the Rodens' house. However, it soon became clear that illegal cockfighting was not the cause of the homicides either. Months went by without uncovering the true motive behind the crime. On April 13, 2017, local authorities announced they lacked sufficient evidence to make any arrests. Nevertheless, prosecutor Rob Yum stated the investigation was ongoing, suggesting they had some leads they were not yet ready to disclose. Another year had passed since the mass crime occurred, and its second memorial service went largely unnoticed. There was no coverage in the local press, and neither the sheriff or the prosecutor attended the memorial service. This led the community to believe that the investigation had stalled. However, on May 12, 2017, a special weapons and tactics team unexpectedly raided a home in Pike County, about 10 miles from the crime scene. Initially, they were searching for suspects, but it was later revealed that they were gathering evidence. Detectives also searched a house in Adams County that had once been owned by Jake Wagner, although he had sold it by then. The investigation took a dramatic turn on June 20, 2017, when the focus shifted to the Wagner family. The investigation included 26-year-old Jake, 27-year-old George III, 47-year-old George IV, and 48-year-old Angela, who lived approximately 15 miles from the victim. The Wagner family moved to Kenai, Alaska, claiming they were struggling to stay in the area. The Wagner family expressed their love for the Roden family, saying their deaths had devastated the Wagner family. The investigation indeed had a breakthrough. Authorities were seeking information from the public about the Wagner family's dealings in guns, ammunition, vehicles, and other related topics. According to the investigation, every family member was involved in the crime that occurred on November 13, 2018. The Attorney General announced that the Wagners and their sons had been arrested and charged with planning and carrying out the murder. Rita Newcomb, the 65-year-old mother of Angela, and Frida Wagner, the mother of George Wagner III, had also been arrested for perjury and obstruction of justice. In 2019, Rita Newcomb had undergone handwriting analysis to confirm her role in forging guardianship documents for Sophie. To avoid going to jail, she had entered a plea deal. As a result, the charges against Frederica Wagner were dropped in June 2019. 2 years later, on April 22, 2021, Jake had reached an agreement with the prosecution. In exchange for revealing details of the crime, all family members would receive life sentences instead of the death penalty. Jake had admitted to killing 5 of the 8 individuals and had received 23 criminal charges, including 8 felonies. The remaining charges had included theft, conspiracy, illegal possession of ammunition, forgery, interception of messages, unlawful use of property, obstruction of justice, corrupt activities, and unlawful intimate conduct with a young woman. Jake had explained that he saw eliminating Hannah May as the only way to ensure custody of his daughter. He believed that if he did not kill the entire Roden family, they would seek revenge and refuse to give custody of Sophie to him. Angela was next to face trial on September 10th. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy, aggravated robbery, and tampering with evidence. In exchange for her testimony against the other defendants, the murder charge was dropped. Angela received a sentence of 30 years in prison. The trial of George Wagner IV had begun on August 28, 2022. Although he denied any involvement in the crime, the prosecution presented evidence of his participation in the planning, execution, and cover-up. Ultimately, George IV was found guilty on 22 counts and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. George III's trial was scheduled for February 2024. Despite the convictions of his family members, he maintained his innocence. The once harmonious family's descent into madness was baffling, and their actions were unforgivable. The actions of the Wagner family left 3 children orphaned, depriving them of the love of their parents, relatives, and a peaceful life. One couldn't help but wonder what Sophie would be like when she grew up and realized what had happened. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jessica Paget. Jessica was born on December 15, 1980, in Pennsylvania, where she spent her entire life. As a child, she was energetic and cheerful. However, her parents, Thomas and Danelle, divorced when she was young. Her mother later remarried, and Jessica formed a close bond with her stepfather, whom she considered her second father. After graduating from high school in 1998, Jessica attended college to study preschool education. It was during this time that she met her future husband, Michael Paget. They began dating, moved in together, and had 2 children over the course of their 8-year relationship. Although they didn't get married until August 2014, Michael was a caring father and husband. However, like any family, they experienced ups and downs in their relationship. Jessica was happy with Michael, but just 4 months after their wedding, she vanished. Before her disappearance, Jessica worked at a kindergarten in Northampton for 2 years. She loved her job, as she was passionate about working with children and had a natural ability to connect with them. The children adored her, and she enjoyed spending time with them. On November 21, 2014, Jessica dropped off her older children at school and then headed to work with her younger son, who attended the same kindergarten. It was a typical day, with no indication of the trouble that was to come. Jessica asked her administrator if she could take a short break from work to send a fax to her mother's house in a rural area near Northampton. The administrator agreed, and Jessica left her son at kindergarten before driving to her mother's house. She was expected to return to work within 30 minutes, but an hour passed and she didn't come back. Her colleagues tried calling her, but she didn't answer. When Jessica failed to return, the kindergarten administrator contacted her husband, Michael, to ask if he knew where she was. Michael said he was at work and hadn't heard from her. He tried calling her, but all his calls went straight to voicemail, which was unusual for Jessica as she always answered calls from her family. Michael then called his mother-in-law, Danelle, who was in Florida, to see if Jessica had contacted her. However, Danelle hadn't heard from her daughter all day and was immediately worried. She suggested that Michael call her husband, Greg, who was Jessica's stepfather, to see if he had any information. However, Greg reported that he hadn't seen or spoken to Jessica that day. As the minutes ticked by, Jessica's relatives grew increasingly worried. After numerous failed attempts to contact her, Danelle took a flight to Pennsylvania to search for her daughter. Meanwhile, for hours after Jessica disappeared from work, her husband Michael reported her missing to the police. He expressed his concern that Jessica would never leave their children voluntarily, leading him to fear the worst. The police promptly launched an investigation, distributing Jessica's description to all nearby stations. She was described as 5 feet 4 inches tall, weighing 130 pounds, with a footprint tattoo on her shoulder, brown hair, and hazel eyes. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing gray sweatpants and a black hoodie with the words "Duck, Duck, Goose" on the front and "Staff" on the back. A thorough search of local hospitals and morgues yielded no results. Detectives worked to determine Jessica's whereabouts, interviewing her co-workers in the process. However, everyone they spoke to reported that Jessica had no enemies and was well liked by her colleagues, children, and their parents. According to her co-workers, Jessica seemed fine when she left work at lunchtime, and they noticed nothing unusual about her behavior. 2 hours after Michael reported his wife Jessica missing, the police were able to locate her phone's signal, which indicated that it was approximately 1 mile from the kindergarten where she worked. Although the data was not entirely accurate due to inherent location determination errors, it provided a general area for the police to focus their search. However, by the time they began searching, it was already nighttime. The police found Jessica's car, a white Subaru Outback, in a nearby parking lot. The vehicle was unlocked and empty, with her purse, documents, and bank card still inside. The keys were in the ignition, and her phone was on the passenger seat next to her purse. There were no signs of a crime in the car, leaving the police with several unanswered questions. Where was Jessica, and what had caused her to abandon her car and valuables so close to her workplace? To answer these questions, the police sought CCTV footage. A camera on the back wall of a store across the street had captured the area where Jessica's car was found. After reviewing the footage with the store manager, the police saw Jessica driving into the parking lot at around 1 p.m. She got out of the car and stood by the driver's door for a short time before leaving and not returning. The investigators were baffled by Jessica's disappearance, as she had left behind her documents, phone, and keys. It was unclear whether she had intentionally gone into hiding. Surveillance footage showed Jessica walking between 2 buildings towards another parking lot, where she vanished from view due to the lack of cameras. To get a better look at the footage, the investigators made a copy of the video to review on a larger screen at the police station. The Northampton Police Department, being a small force, enlisted the help of the Pennsylvania State Police to coordinate a search effort. Flyers with Jessica's photo were distributed throughout Northampton and surrounding cities, as well as shared on social media and through local news outlets. State police detectives began reconstructing the events leading up to Jessica's disappearance. They started by re-interviewing the kindergarten staff, who revealed that Jessica had left work to send a fax from her mother's house. The detectives then visited the house, which was approximately 4 miles from the kindergarten, in search of answers. The detectives met with Donnell and her husband Greg at the scene and learned that Jessica had keys to their home and could visit at any time. On the day of her disappearance, both Donnell and Greg had been out, Donnell in Florida and Greg elsewhere, which left uncertainty about Jessica's activities at the house. They also checked Greg's fax machine for records of usage, but found that the device was faulty, which didn't provide any clear information. Jessica might have used another fax machine, but it still didn't explain why she had left her belongings in her car. The detectives decided to speak with Jessica's husband Michael, as husbands are often suspects in such cases. To confirm Michael's story that he was the first to leave the house on the day Jessica disappeared, detectives investigated his claim. It was a possibility they couldn't rule out, as statistically, a significant number of disappearances involve a partner. As they continued the investigation, the police arranged a search party, and local media alerted the public about Jessica's disappearance. Anyone with information was asked to come forward. By this point, 48 hours had passed, but no new leads emerged on Jessica's journey to her mother's house. To aid in their investigation, detectives scoured the route to her mother's house for surveillance cameras. One key location, an Exxon gas station adjacent to the main road leading to the mother's residence, had multiple cameras installed. Given the fact that this gas station was strategically situated on Jessica's stated route, the police logically inferred that if Jessica drove in the direction she said, she would be captured on camera. A review of the recording showed that her car was, indeed, captured driving by at approximately 12:56 p.m. From there, the journey to her mother's house took just a few minutes, suggesting Jessica would need to make the short trip back in order to utilize a functional fax machine, which wasn't operational at her mother's home. While fast-forwarding the tape to find a shot of the vehicle's potential return, detectives made a perplexing observation. The footage shows Jessica's white car speeding through a gas station just 14 minutes later. Notably, the car took a peculiar route, turning towards the gas station and continuing onto the other side without stopping, before heading towards the city center, where the car was later abandoned in a parking lot. Given her rapid pace, the likely reason for this unusual detour was a red traffic light at the intersection, which Jessica may have attempted to avoid by cutting through the gas station. From there, she drove onto a different road where the light was green and eventually left her car in the parking lot, where a police officer discovered it later. However, a surprising detail emerged upon closer inspection of the footage. Jessica, who was 5 feet 4 inches tall and 130 pounds, appeared to be much shorter and lighter than the person seen exiting her car. Measuring against the known height of the car, experts estimated that this person stood between 5 feet 11 inches and 6 feet 3 inches tall. Moreover, during their examination of the abandoned car, the police noticed that the driver's seat was pushed forward, which would make it uncomfortable for someone taller than 5 feet 11 inches to operate the vehicle comfortably. The police initially found it suspicious that the driver's seat was positioned for someone of Jessica's height. However, after reviewing the footage, they discovered that the person who got out of the car had adjusted the seat to its most forward position, attempting to make it seem like Jessica was driving. But this raised another question: who was the tall person seen in the footage? Michael, he, stood at around 6 feet tall. The police brought him in for questioning, and he denied any involvement in his wife's disappearance, claiming he was at work when the kindergarten staff called him. Detectives verified his alibi by interviewing his colleagues and tracking the geolocation of his phone on the day of Jessica's disappearance. The evidence confirmed that Michael was indeed at work at the time, which meant the person in the footage was not him. For days had passed since Jessica's disappearance, and her children were struggling to cope with the stress and uncertainty. Despite the ongoing search efforts, no leads had been found. Investigators re-examined the footage of someone exiting Jessica's car, but the person's identity remained a mystery. However, upon closer inspection, the officers noticed a detail they had previously missed. A minute after the unknown person disappeared from view, a white SUV, likely a Ford, left the scene. This new information led the police to Greg, Jessica's stepfather, who matched the suspect's height description and owned a similar vehicle. The police requested that Greg come to the station for questioning, leaving him shocked and dismayed to be considered a suspect in his stepdaughter's disappearance. Greg claimed that he had left his car at a service center for repairs and that a neighbor had given him a ride there to pick it up. He then stated that he had stopped at an Exxon gas station to grab a bite to eat. However, the police obtained CCTV footage from the gas station, which showed Greg driving past the station just 2 minutes after leaving the service center. It turned out that Greg had lied about stopping at the gas station. Further investigation revealed that Greg's entire story was fabricated. His neighbor denied driving him to the service center, contradicting Greg's claim. This led detectives to suspect that Greg might have been involved in Jessica's disappearance. By piecing together the evidence, investigators concluded that Greg was likely at home when Jessica arrived. It's possible that something happened, and Greg drove Jessica's car to a parking lot in the city center. The police searched Greg's house, where they found evidence that contradicted his alibi. The fax machine, which Greg claimed was not working, was found to be functional, and its usage history showed that Jessica had indeed sent a fax from the house on the day of her disappearance. Furthermore, a trash can in the basement contained napkins with bloodstains, and Greg's shoes, which were found in a dumpster on the street, had dried blood on them. Donnell reported to the police that Greg had requested an early trash pickup the day before, which seemed unusual at the time, especially since the trash can wasn't full. In hindsight, this could be how Greg disposed of evidence related to cleaning products and rags used in the house. During a second interrogation, the police confronted Greg, stating that they knew his previous statements were false and that they had found evidence in his home. They also informed him that they were aware Jessica had been at his house on the day she disappeared. Greg then began to talk. Greg claimed that when he returned home on the afternoon of November 21st, he found Jessica's car in the driveway and bloodstains on the carpet. He alleged that Jessica was already dead when he arrived and that he panicked, fearing no one would believe him. He supposedly drove Jessica's car to a city center parking lot and then returned home. Greg also stated that Jessica had outstanding debts, which he claimed led to her death. However, detectives later discovered that this was another lie, and they found evidence that Greg had purchased adult toys the day before Jessica disappeared. The investigators were fed up with Greg's inconsistent stories, so they directly asked him where he had hidden his stepdaughter Jessica's body, explaining that an autopsy would provide answers to many questions. Realizing he was caught, Greg changed his story again. This time, he claimed he was at home watching adult videos when Jessica arrived and asked to send a fax. According to Greg, he was standing behind her as she used the computer, and he became aroused and developed a desire for his stepdaughter. Without saying a word, he allegedly pulled out a gun and shot her in the back of the head. Then, he moved Jessica's body to the bedroom. Greg then drove Jessica's car to a parking lot in the city center, where he had previously left his Ford for repairs. To mislead investigators, he adjusted the seat to make it appear as though Jessica was driving. What Greg said next shocked the investigators. After returning home, he set up a video camera near the bed and recorded a video of himself with Jessica's body. The police later found this disturbing video on Greg's computer. Greg confessed to wrapping his stepdaughter Jessica's body in a blanket and hiding it in a ravine near his home. He claimed he was not a bad person, but had lost control. After the crime, Greg's life fell apart. He lost his business, home, dogs, and wife. However, he never mentioned the loss of Jessica. Jessica's mother, Danelle, was shocked to discover that her daughter was dead and that her husband was responsible. The authorities announced Jessica's death, stating that she was a victim of homicide. The district attorney, John Morganelli, expressed skepticism about Greg's version of events, but believed there was a sexual motive behind the crime. The prosecutor's office examined the evidence to determine if Greg had planned the attack. Jessica's family released a statement thanking law enforcement, the media, and the public for their efforts. They described Jessica as a beautiful and vibrant young woman who was loved by her family and friends, and stated that her loss made the world a darker place. Gregory Gregg, 53, was charged with the murder of Jessica Padette. Initially, investigators suspected that Greg had tried to persuade Jessica into a romantic encounter, but when she refused, he killed her to avoid exposure. However, this theory was difficult to prove due to the lack of defensive wounds on Jessica's body. She died from a single wound to the back of her head, which corroborated Greg's testimony. Under Pennsylvania law, Greg could have faced the death penalty, but since Jessica was already dead when he committed the second part of the crime, the prosecution could not pursue the death penalty. An examination of Greg and Jessica's computers and phones revealed no evidence of a relationship beyond that of stepfather and stepdaughter. The trial began in 2015. District Attorney John Morganelli noted that Greg's lawyer, John McMahon Jr., failed to submit the results of a mental health evaluation for Greg. McMahon claimed that he had Greg evaluated for a possible insanity defense, but the evaluation found that Greg did not have a diminished mental capacity, so McMahon did not use it in the trial. During the trial, the jury was forced to watch a disturbing 6-minute video that Greg had recorded, which showed him committing heinous crimes using adult toys he had purchased the day before. The jury was reluctant to view the video, but the judge ruled that they were obligated to watch it before reaching a verdict. Greg's lawyer argued that the crime was not premeditated and that his client should be charged with a third-degree crime rather than a first-degree crime. In response, Northampton County District Attorney John Morganelli presented the video as evidence to prove that the crime was, in fact, premeditated. Morganelli explained that this was necessary to convince the jurors of Greg's guilt, despite the disturbing nature of the footage. The jury delivered a unanimous verdict in just 6 minutes, finding Greg guilty of taking Jessica's life and desecrating her body. As a result, the court sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. When asked by the judge if he had any final words, Greg simply replied, "No, sir. I'm just very sorry." Following the sentencing, the judge advised the jurors to seek counseling from a psychologist to cope with the traumatic case. Jessica's husband, Michael, spoke to reporters, expressing the difficulty of moving on without his beloved wife and raising their 3 children alone. He described Jessica as the most wonderful person he had ever met. In a separate matter, Danelle, Greg's wife, has initiated divorce proceedings. However, the process is proving to be complex and Greg is hindering her efforts. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Isabella Rodriguez. Isabella Rodriguez was born in Colombia in 1975 and moved to Florida with her family in the 1990s. They obtained U.S. residency and eventually citizenship in 2002, when Isabella was 27. She married William Hellman, but they divorced in 2015 after a decade together. Isabella then met Louis Bennett online, and they began a romantic relationship. In 2016, Isabella and Louis had a daughter named Amelia. 6 months later, they purchased an apartment in Delray Beach, a city on Florida's Atlantic coast. They married the following month, in February 2017. At the time, Isabella worked as a real estate agent, and Louis owned a small solar panel company. On April 30, 2017, Isabella flew to the Caribbean island of St. Martin to meet Louis, leaving their 9-month-old daughter with relatives. They planned to spend a week on the water, returning home to Florida on Louis's sailing catamaran. After stopping in the British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, they arrived in Cuba, where they stayed for a few days. On May 14th, the catamaran set sail from Varadero, Cuba, bound for Florida. Isabella called her sister 3 hours later to say she would be home the next day. At around 1 a.m., Louis sent out a distress signal to the U.S. Coast Guard, reporting that his ship had collided with an unknown object and was sinking. He also reported that his wife, Isabella, was missing. A Coast Guard helicopter crew located Louis in a life raft around 4 a.m. and took him to Key West Island, the southernmost part of Florida. The catamaran was found floating upside down at dawn, but had not yet sunk. During an interview with investigators, Louis explained that he and Isabella took turns keeping watch. At the time of the accident, it was Isabella's turn, and Louis was asleep in his stateroom. He woke up to the sound of the collision and rushed on deck, but couldn't find Isabella. He called out her name, but she didn't respond. Louis suspected that the loose mast might have knocked her overboard. Louis also stated that the last time he saw Isabella, she was wearing a life jacket. When he was rescued, a Coast Guard rescue swimmer noticed that Louis's backpack was unusually heavy. Upon inspection, officers found 225 collectible coins in the backpack, but their origin was unclear. Isabella Hellman went missing on May 15th, prompting a 4-day search and rescue operation by the Coast Guard. As no signs of her were found, the operation was officially ended on May 18th. The authorities were suspicious when Louis Bennett, Isabella's husband, requested a letter from the Coast Guard stating that his wife was presumed dead just 24 hours after the search had ended. The Coast Guard denied the request, as it was outside their jurisdiction to issue such a certificate. 6 days later, Louis announced on TV that he was traveling to Cuba to rent a boat and continue the search for his wife on his own. However, just 3 days after making this statement, Louis claimed to have already returned from Cuba and met with Isabella's sister, saying he had checked hospitals but found no signs of her. Louis expressed his despair and resignation to the situation, stating he was struggling to accept that his wife might be gone. He described Isabella as his soul mate and someone he thought he would be with forever. The next day, Lewis and the police attempted to retrieve his daughter from his wife's family, but they refused to relinquish her. Lewis ultimately took custody of his daughter with the help of the police, despite the scandal surrounding him. During the dispute, Isabella's sister repeatedly accused Lewis of being responsible for Isabella's death. Lewis's calm behavior and actions after his wife's disappearance raised suspicions among both Isabella's family and the police. Investigations revealed that Isabella and Lewis had frequent arguments after the birth of their child. Family, friends, and neighbors all confirmed this. Isabella had confided in loved ones that Lewis wanted to move to Australia, but she was opposed to leaving the United States. On May 30th, Lewis gave an interview in which he denied any involvement in his wife's disappearance. He claimed they had plans for a happy life together, but now he was alone and their daughter would grow up without a mother. While investigating Isabella's disappearance, the police also looked into the origin of valuable coins found among Lewis's belongings. It was discovered that Lewis had previously worked as a first mate on a yacht. The captain of that yacht had a collection of 617 rare coins worth around $100,000, which was discovered a year earlier. While the yacht was unoccupied and docked in the Caribbean, thieves broke in and stole the coins on board. Although the perpetrator was not caught at the time, the yacht's captain later identified the coins found on Lewis Bennett as part of the stolen loot, now that the FBI was investigating their origin. This new information led the FBI to obtain a search warrant for Lewis's apartment. Previously, 225 coins had been found among his belongings when he was rescued. On June 16, 2017, the search of his apartment uncovered an additional 162 gold coins hidden in a closet. Meanwhile, Lewis had relocated to England, where his parents lived, and had taken his daughter with him. However, due to financial difficulties, he returned to the United States and settled into an apartment valued at $125,000, while also receiving insurance payments for a lost catamaran. On August 28, 2017, Lewis Bennett was arrested in Florida and charged with stealing coins. He pleaded not guilty. A few days later, a federal judge set his bail at $250,000, which Lewis was unable to pay. As a result, he remained in custody while awaiting trial. Additionally, Lewis attempted to have his wife declared dead. Lewis benefited from his wife Isabella's disappearance by gaining control of their shared property and bank accounts. However, the judge refused to declare Isabella dead twice, as the investigation into her disappearance was ongoing. In a separate case, Lewis pleaded guilty to stealing coins and transporting them to the United States in November 2017. Lewis's parents asked the judge to be lenient when sentencing him, citing the fact that his daughter had already lost her mother. In February 2018, Lewis received a sentence of 7 months in prison followed by 3 years of probation. On the same day, Lewis was charged with second-degree murder in Isabella's death. Authorities believed he intentionally caused the catamaran they were on to crash, which was allegedly a staged event to cover up the crime. The prosecutor's case was based on a claim that Lewis wanted to inherit Isabella's wealth to pay off his debts and take their young daughter to live in Australia. Isabella had expressed fear of her husband in text messages a few months before her death, stating that she felt he no longer respected her. She expressed fear about returning home. In a message sent months before her disappearance, Isabella wrote, "If you no longer like or love me, let's resolve this immediately. It's sad how you treated me the entire time." An inspection of the catamaran before it sank revealed that the portholes below the water line were left open. The damage to the dual hulls seemed to originate from within the vessel, near the water line. The water line is the point where the surface of the water meets the hull of a floating vessel. An expert hired by the FBI analyzed photos and videos taken by the U.S. Coast Guard of the catamaran before it sank. The expert concluded that Lewis's account of the events was not credible. The analysis suggested that the vessel did not sink due to accidental damage, but rather appeared to have been intentionally scuttled. A professor of nautical architecture and ocean engineering at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy testified in court that the Coast Guard found no evidence of a collision that could have caused the catamaran to sink. Divers inspecting the vessel were cautious due to the risk of collapse, and eventually, the catamaran sank to a depth of over 4,000 feet, preventing a detailed inspection. 2 years after Isabella Hellman's disappearance, a judge officially declared her dead. Palm Beach County Circuit Judge Scott Suskauer issued a series of orders stating that Isabella was presumed to have died on May 14, 2017. Despite the passage of time, Isabella's body has not been found, and she has not contacted her family. Based on the available evidence, it is presumed that Isabella is deceased. The statement said, in January 2019, U.S. District Judge Federico Moreno suspended Lewis's February sentencing hearing in Miami and rescheduled it for May 28, saying he would not act until Isabella's family could personally visit her daughter Amelia, who turned 3 in July. In November 2019, Lewis pleaded guilty to manslaughter, and the second-degree murder charge against him was dropped. Before the plea deal, he faced a possible life sentence for second-degree murder, but the new charges limited his maximum sentence to 8 years in prison. According to a document filed with the court, Lewis claimed he didn't remember what he was doing when he discovered his wife was missing. He didn't search for her on the catamaran or in the water, nor did he use flares to signal for help. Instead, Lewis packed his belongings onto a life raft and then intentionally damaged the catamaran to make it flood, allowing him to escape on the raft. Prosecutors stated that Lewis waited 45 minutes after realizing his wife was missing to call for help. Notably, the U.S. Attorney's Office pointed out that Lewis was an experienced sailor with training in emergency procedures, having previously sailed from St. Martin to Australia. Don't understand why he failed to use his knowledge to respond to the emergency situation. Prosecutor states that Lewis admitted to being negligent in handing over control of the catamaran to his inexperienced wife, Isabella, resulting in her falling overboard and drowning. Despite being an experienced sailor with a Royal Yachting Association certification, Lewis failed to ensure Isabella wore proper safety gear. In contrast, Isabella had no formal sailing training or experience, and Lewis knew it. Lewis received training in emergency procedures, including man-overboard protocols and night sailing safety, but Isabella did not. The prosecutor notes that only Lewis knows the full story of what happened on the catamaran that night. Following Lewis' guilty plea, Isabella's family, through their lawyer, expressed their immense pain and asked Lewis to show remorse. They stated that while Lewis can never undo the harm caused by taking Isabella away, he continues to cause additional pain by depriving them of contact with his and Isabella's daughter, Amelia. Isabella Hellman's family is grieving and missing her dearly. Although they have had limited contact with her daughter Amelia through 3 FaceTime calls, they have not been able to see or hug her in a long time. They long to be reunited with Amelia and provide her with love and care. As a part of their family, they want to be with her. They urged Lewis Bennett to do the right thing. Lewis Bennett, Isabella's husband, was sentenced to 8 years in prison on May 28, 2019, after pleading guilty to manslaughter in connection with her death. During his sentencing hearing, Bennett apologized sincerely to Isabella's family for putting them through immense pain. He acknowledged that his actions led to a devastating tragedy, for which he is truly remorseful. Lewis admitted to making poor decisions that worsened the situation. He expressed regret in federal court in Miami, where he waived his right to appeal as part of his plea bargain. Before the judge delivered the sentence, Lewis requested the opportunity to be released from prison early so that he could continue to care for their daughter, Amelia. Lewis expressed a desire to care for his daughter, saying, "I want to raise her in a way that honors my late wife's wishes." However, the judge ruled against him, sentencing him to 8 years in prison followed by 3 years of supervised release. As a result, Amelia will remain with her paternal grandparents in England for the time being. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jennifer Wilbanks. Jennifer Wilbanks was born on February 28, 1973, in Georgia, where she spent her entire life surrounded by family, friends, and work. It was in Duluth that she met her fiancé, John Mason, who was also 32 years old. John came from a wealthy family that owned a private medical clinic in Duluth. His friends described him as a kind and caring person who was always willing to help those in need. Jennifer and John had been dating for about a year and seemed like the perfect couple. Everyone who knew them was excited when they announced their engagement. The wedding preparations were underway, and a lavish ceremony was planned for April 30, 2005, with several hundred guests invited. However, just 4 days before the wedding, on April 26, 2005, John reported Jennifer's disappearance to the police. He claimed she had gone for an evening run and never returned. John initially tried to find Jennifer on his own but eventually sought help from law enforcement. The next day, April 27th, a massive search operation was launched, involving over 300 police officers and volunteers. They combed through the wooded areas and water bodies along the route Jennifer was supposed to run. Given the urgency of the situation, even off-duty police officers were called in to assist. One of the search teams found potential clues, including clothing, sneakers, and a strand of long, dark hair. All of these findings were sent to the lab for examination. Jennifer's family distributed flyers with her picture and posted them around the city, hoping someone might have information about her disappearance. The media picked up the story, and billboards with her image appeared around town. The police searched the home she shared with her fiancé, John, but found nothing suspicious. As the investigation continued, Major Donald Woodruff of the Duluth Police Department announced that Jennifer's disappearance was being treated as a criminal case, with the FBI and Georgia Bureau of Investigation involved. Despite a second day of searching, no signs of Jennifer were found. Her family was shocked and distraught, and they reached out to radio and TV stations to publicize her disappearance, suggesting that she might have been kidnapped and taken out of state. Jennifer's family begged her possible kidnapper to release her. The cable news channels extensively covered the story, raising questions about her disappearance. Jennifer was just 4 days away from her wedding. Her relatives, visibly distraught, made emotional appeals during press conferences and interviews. In this photo, a visibly distressed John Mason is shown comforting his mother-in-law. If you're familiar with true crime stories, you may have already pieced together the events surrounding Jennifer's disappearance. As the last person to see Jennifer alive, John became the subject of suspicion when searches yielded no results. Investigators sought to uncover the truth behind John's wholesome image. To those who knew him, he appeared to be a law-abiding citizen who attended church every Sunday and couldn't harm a fly. He was asked to take a lie detector test, but he declined. Instead, he took a private polygraph test with his lawyer present and gave the results to the police. However, this unusual action only heightened the detective's suspicions about John Mason. The test results did not conclusively determine whether John was involved in his fiancée's disappearance. To investigate potential motives, detectives conducted a thorough search of their home and seized 3 computers. Notably, no signs of a struggle or evidence of a crime were found in the house. On the day before the wedding, Jennifer's family offered a $100,000 reward for information that could help find her, either dead or alive. The police held a press conference to announce that they were ending the active search. According to the police chief, they had exhausted all possible leads in the area and found no clues, leading them to call off the search. John Mason attended the press conference but did not speak to reporters. Jennifer's uncle speculated that John was simply unsure of what to say, which only fueled speculation about his involvement in her disappearance. Initially, the police found some items, including clothes, shoes, and a lock of hair, that they thought might be connected to Jennifer's disappearance. However, further investigation revealed that these items had no link to her case. The only suspect with a potential motive was John, and journalists were closely following him, making it seem likely that he was involved in her disappearance. However, no concrete evidence had been found. The next day, which was supposed to be Jennifer's wedding day, people gathered to pray for her safe return. On the evening of April 29th, John received a mysterious phone call from an unknown number. When he answered, he was shocked to hear Jennifer's voice on the other end. She told him that she had been kidnapped, taken to an unknown location, and forced into a physically intimate situation. She was crying and said that after everything was over, she was released, but now she was lost and didn't know where she was. John was overcome with emotions as he spoke to Jennifer, trying to remain calm to keep her calm as well. He was relieved to know she was alive, but soon, a new development would arise. After talking to John, Jennifer called 911 and reported her alleged kidnapping and release, stating that she was unsure of her location. The police investigation into Jennifer's disappearance led them to a payphone in Albuquerque, New Mexico, over 1,400 miles from her hometown of Duluth, Georgia. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Jennifer, who was reunited with her relieved family. The family praised the efforts of the community and the media, believing their attention had persuaded the supposed kidnapper to release Jennifer. However, during her interview at the police station, authorities noticed discrepancies between Jennifer's account of her ordeal and her actual appearance. She claimed to have been held captive by a man and a woman in their 40s, tied up in a blue van. But when FBI agents questioned her, they found numerous inconsistencies in her story. Confronted with these discrepancies, Jennifer confessed that she had fabricated the entire kidnapping. Jennifer had actually left her fiancé, John, by telling him she was going for a run, and instead boarded a bus to New Mexico. She explained that she had been overwhelmed by the pressure of her upcoming wedding and couldn't cope. Further investigation revealed that Jennifer had a history of problematic behavior, with 3 prior charges of shoplifting. Jennifer was involved in several incidents of theft before her infamous kidnapping case. In 1996, she stole $37 worth of goods from Walmart. The following year, at the age of 24, she was accused of stealing $1,740 worth of merchandise from a supermarket. She paid for the damages and completed community service, which led to the theft charges being dropped. However, in 1998, she was caught stealing again, with damages amounting to $98. There were also allegations of theft from families who had hired her as a nanny. These thefts were considered minor, and she managed to avoid imprisonment. After her disappearance and subsequent return, the attention shifted from the thefts to the large-scale search operation conducted by the state of Georgia, which cost nearly $60,000. Jennifer attributed her disappearance to the overwhelming pressure of her impending wedding. With numerous tasks to complete and limited time, she felt stressed and pressured. Authorities later stated that the wedding had become too much for her to handle. Duluth Police Chief Randy Belcher clarified that Jennifer's fiancé was innocent of any involvement in her disappearance, despite initial suspicions. Jennifer Wilbanks, dubbed the Runaway Bride, apologized publicly to her family, friends, and community for her disappearance. When she returned, her fiancé, John Mason, immediately gave her back the engagement ring she had left behind, signifying his ongoing commitment to their relationship. According to Mason, his commitment to Wilbanks was solidified when he proposed and gave her the ring, regardless of their unfinished wedding plans. Following her return, Wilbanks sought medical treatment to address underlying issues that contributed to her escape. However, Her troubles persisted, and she was charged with making false statements related to her disappearance. This led to a guilty plea for perjury, resulting in 2 years of probation, 120 hours of community service, and a restitution payment of over $15,000 to the city. The situation took another turn when Wilbanks sued her now ex-fiancé, John Mason, in 2006. They had ended their engagement, and Wilbanks claimed that Mason had exploited her trust during her treatment by selling the rights to their story for $500,000 without her knowledge. He allegedly used the funds to purchase a house, registered solely in his name, and then kicked her out after their breakup. Wilbanks sought $250,000 as compensation for her share of the house and an additional $250,000 in damages. After the failed wedding, John Mason filed a countersuit against Jennifer Wilbanks, claiming he suffered emotional distress from being left at the wedding and suggesting she might have been involved in her own disappearance. In December 2006, both parties dropped their lawsuits, reportedly as part of a settlement. Meanwhile, Jennifer's notoriety caught the attention of global media, making her a temporary celebrity. In the aftermath, several products emerged, such as a runaway bride action figure and a hot sauce called Jennifer's Hightail and Hot Sauce. A musical play based on her story opened in Duluth, Georgia, in March 2008. Even a photo of her fiancé, John Mason, appeared in the house for the 2008 movie, The Grand. Eventually, John Mason married another woman in 2008 in a small ceremony at his parents' home. Jennifer also got married in 2010, but her marriage ended after 11 years, and she still resides in Georgia. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alice Adams and Tibor Vass. Alice Adams and Tibor Vass were colleagues at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Heathrow Hotel. Living just 6 miles from the hotel, Alice had joined the team 3 weeks prior and quickly formed friendships with her co-workers, particularly Tibor. Born and raised in Budapest, Hungary, Tibor was a people person who loved music, playing almost every instrument, with the piano being his favorite. He had taught his younger sister, Isabella, to play piano, and they would often perform together for their parents. Tragedy struck in 2007 when Tibor's father passed away, leaving the family struggling to cope. Tibor, then a teenager, took on a more significant role in supporting his mother, Rosalia, and younger sister. At 15, he started working full-time to help alleviate his mother's burden. He later applied to the University of Budapest in 2008, hoping a college degree would lead to a better job and greater financial stability for his family. Despite his exceptional talent, Tibor was unfortunately denied admission to the university. Tibor discussed his plans to move to Great Britain with his mother, who seemed to support the idea. In July 2010, at the age of 19, Tibor relocated to the United Kingdom and settled in London. He began working at the Radisson Blu Edwardian Heathrow Hotel, where he enjoyed his job, responsibilities, and interactions with colleagues and new clients. Tibor quickly formed a bond with Alice, a talented musician, as they often found common topics to discuss. Both Tibor and Alice worked as receptionists at the hotel, along with Attila Ban, a 31-year-old who had been employed there the longest. Attila was recognized as the hotel's best employee in 2010. As Tibor and Attila were both from Hungary, they developed a close relationship. The hotel provided accommodation for its new employees, and Attila and Tibor lived in a company apartment behind the hotel. This arrangement was convenient, as it saved them money and reduced their commute time. Tibor was thrilled to be in England, but he didn't abandon his plans for higher education. He reapplied to the university in Budapest and was accepted this time around. Overjoyed, he had to return to Hungary in August 2011. To bid him farewell, a small party was organized on August 9, 2011, attended by Tibor, Attila, Alice, and other hotel employees. The next day, The trio was scheduled to work, but none of them showed up. Their colleagues raised the alarm when they failed to report for work at 7 a.m., and the police were notified at 7:53 a.m. Upon arriving at the house, the police found the door unlocked and the interior quiet. When an officer opened the door, he was met with a disturbing scene. Alice lay on the living room floor, her face covered by a pillow, with 22 stab wounds on her body, as later confirmed by the medical examiners. In the bedroom, Tibor's naked body was found on the bed, having died from 2 stab wounds to the heart. Attila, however, was nowhere to be found. The police surrounded the house to secure the area, and investigators and forensic experts started their investigation. As they examined the crime scene, they discovered that the bed where Tibor's body was found was not where he was actually killed. The bed was too tidy, indicating that Tibor had met his fate elsewhere. It appeared that the perpetrator had initially wounded him, removed his clothes, cleaned his body, and then placed him on the bed. Upon further inspection, the apartment was found to contain empty alcohol bottles and illicit substances, suggesting that they had been used during a party. Police officers thoroughly searched the house, the surrounding area, and the attic for Attila Ban, but he was nowhere to be found. His personal belongings, including his papers, were still in the apartment. As a result, Attila became the prime suspect in the investigation. While forensic experts continued to analyze the crime scene, investigators began questioning Attila's co-workers at the hotel. The staff reported that Attila had taken a particular interest in Tibor, a new employee from the same country, immediately showing him around and helping him settle in. Attila even went so far as to adjust his work schedule to match Tibor's. Tibor was a young and attractive man who attracted a lot of female attention. However, investigators discovered that Attila had romantic feelings for Tibor, which he openly expressed. According to the hotel staff, Tibor had rejected Attila's advances, making Attila unhappy. Things took a turn for the worse when Alice joined the hotel staff 3 weeks before her death, and Tibor started paying attention to her. Attila became jealous, despite knowing that Tibor was only interested in women. The investigation raised an important question: could Attila have committed the murder out of jealousy and unrequited love? A disturbing Facebook post from Attila, made before the police discovered the bodies, suggested that he was indeed involved. At 6:23 a.m., Attila had posted, "I would like to wake up from that nightmare." Friends commented on the post, expressing their concern, but Attila never responded. This message further solidified the investigators' suspicions that Attila Ban was responsible for the deaths of his colleagues. The number of stab wounds provided a clear indication of what had transpired. Alice sustained 22 stab wounds, while Tibor was stabbed only twice. Furthermore, the positioning of the victims was telling. Alice was found on the floor with a pillow over her face, while Tibor was discovered on the bed. When investigators spoke with the other people who had been at the apartment earlier that night, they learned that Attila, Tibor, and Alice had been the only ones left behind. This suggested that the tragic events had unfolded after the others had left, in the hours leading up to dawn. The news of Alice's death sent shockwaves through the families of both the victim and the perpetrator. The Adams family, Alice's family, released a statement in which her mother, Sarah, paid a heartfelt tribute to her daughter. She expressed her overwhelming grief, saying, "My heart is shattered into a million pieces. I will carry this sadness with me for the rest of my life. I deeply miss my beloved Alice and would do anything to have one more chance to hug her tightly and see her bright smile. The loss of my child has awakened intense emotions within our family, sorrow, anger, and a sense of devastation that we can hardly bear. As a mother, I feel that I failed to protect my child, and that realization is something I must confront every day. Not knowing exactly what happened to Alice on the night of her murder is a constant torment. I would rather face the harsh truth than be left to imagine the sequence of events that led to her death. Alice was an extraordinary and unique individual who brought so much love, joy, passion, and kindness into the lives of everyone she touched. Her loss is a tragedy that cannot be put into words. Meanwhile, police were searching for Attila Ban, but he seemed to have disappeared without a trace. When they attempted to track his phone, they found that it was transmitting signals from the same area as the hotel, which was unusual. It was later revealed that Attila was actually much closer than anyone had suspected. After spending 2 days examining the crime scene, the investigative team left the house, only to have the forensic team return later to conduct additional tests. Upon re-entering the house, they found that the door they had left unlocked was now locked from the inside. Inside the room, they discovered Attila Ban lying on the bed, intoxicated and wounded after attempting to harm himself with scissors and a knife. The investigators questioned Attila, but he responded bizarrely, using gestures to convey his thoughts. He was then taken to the hospital for medical attention. Unbeknownst to the investigators, Attila had created a hiding space within the sofa bed where Tibor Vasa's body was found. To create this makeshift hiding spot, he had made a slit in the bed's base, grabbed a phone, several bottles of water, and climbed inside. Throughout the investigation, Attila had been secretly watching and listening to the police through the holes he had made. Attila Ban was arrested at the hospital as the main suspect in the crime. His trial began on July 9, 2012, and during the proceedings, details of the heinous crime were revealed. The party had escalated out of control after Tibor, Alice, and Attila were left alone in the apartment. Prosecutors confirmed that there was a consensual physical encounter between the three, with DNA evidence found on Miss Adams' body. The evening took a devastating turn. Attila claimed to have no memory of the events that followed, only recalling waking up the next morning to find Alice and Tibor lifeless. Overcome with guilt and remorse, he considered taking his own life but was too afraid to do so alone. The court learned that Attila had been consumed by jealousy towards Tibor, particularly after a team-building event where he had thrown a tantrum because Tibor was in a photograph and he was not. The situation worsened when Attila discovered that Tibor had been accepted into a university program in Hungary and would be leaving the UK soon. The final trigger was likely witnessing Tibor and Alice kissing, which sent Attila into a fit of rage, ultimately leading him to take the lives of his two friends. Prosecutor Richard Whittam revealed in court that Attila Ban was discovered naked on a single bed, with injuries to his wrists, forearm, and neck. It was later found that he had been hiding in the base of a double bed. Remarkably, he had managed to conceal himself and remain undetected throughout the entire investigation, including the pathologist's examination, the removal of the bodies, and the crime scene examiner's investigation. When questioned about the oversight, Detective Inspector John Finch defended the police, stating that it would be impractical and potentially damaging to lift up every bed in search of people. He explained that this could result in the loss of crucial forensic evidence and was not a standard procedure in such cases. Rosalia, the mother of Tibor Vas, paid a heartfelt tribute to her son, remembering him as a friendly, outgoing, and talented young man. She recalled his childhood interests in music, arts, and sports, as well as his passion for photography, which led him to invest in a professional camera with his first paycheck. According to Rosalia, Tibor had many friends in both Hungary and the UK who appreciated his kind and supportive nature. She said that, on August 11th, I received devastating news. My 20-year-old son, Tibor, and his friend Alice had been murdered. The killer was a shocking revelation, Tibor's own friend, who I had trusted to look out for my son. This friend had personally promised to keep Tibor safe, which made the news even more difficult to accept. Days before the murder, I had taken comfort in knowing that Tibor had found a mature and intelligent friend in London. Now, I was consumed by grief and struggled to comprehend the tragedy. The subsequent police investigation and trial only added to my suffering, forcing me to relive the horrors of that fateful night. The pain and loss my family experiences will stay with us for the rest of our lives. The perpetrator, Attila Ban, pleaded guilty but claimed he couldn't recall the details of the crime. On July 18, 2012, the jury delivered a guilty verdict after just 5 hours of deliberation. A month later, on August 17, Attila Ban was sentenced to 2 life terms. He will have to serve 26 years before being eligible for parole. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kani Alm. Kani Alm was born on July 18, 1974, in Malaysia. She was the younger of 2 daughters and enjoyed a very close relationship with her parents. In 1995, Kani moved to the United States to pursue higher education and a career in information technology. While living in the United States, Kani met a man named Brandon. He was a U.S. citizen and an ethnic Chinese whose parents emigrated from Singapore over 20 years ago. Initially, Kani and Brandon were just friends, but their friendship eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. Brandon became a significant figure in Kani's life, supporting and helping her in various ways. They got married in 2001. Kani's life was on track in 2003. She was working as an analyst in San Diego, planning a future with her husband, and hoping to start a family. Her life changed dramatically that year. The trouble began when Kani's father, Ong Bai Young, was diagnosed with cancer. Kani decided to fly to Malaysia to support her family during this difficult time. On June 1, 2003, Kani and her husband, Brandon, arrived in Malaysia. However, Brandon returned to the USA after a few days, leaving Kani to care for her father in Kuala Lumpur. Despite the distance, Kani and Brandon stayed close through daily phone calls. They would talk for hours, sharing stories about their daily lives, including their 2 pets. Kani's father underwent surgery to remove a kidney, but fortunately, his health began to recover. As he improved, Kani planned her return to the USA, scheduling a flight for June 14, 2003. Kani organized a farewell dinner at a local restaurant the evening before her departure, and she invited her mother, sister, and closest friends to join her. That evening, June 13, 2003, Kani and her mother arrived at the designated meeting spot later than the others. They had trouble finding a parking spot in front of the mall, so Kani parked in the underground lot. However, her mother was concerned about the poor lighting in the lot, rather than the parking fee. Once they arrived at the second-floor restaurant, Kani was excited to reunite with her childhood friends, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. They spent a few hours catching up, but Kani soon noticed that her mother, Pearlie, was starting to look tired. When Kani asked if her mother wanted to head home, Pearlie said she had a lot to do that day, but was okay with leaving early and promised her friends she would be back soon. Kani, her mother, and her sister Elsie got up from the table to pay for their parking. They went to the payment terminal, which was located on the first floor, a floor above the underground parking lot. As they waited in line for the terminal, Kani realized she had left the parking ticket in their car. She asked her sister and mother to stay in line while she went back down to retrieve the ticket. Elsie and Pearlie waited for 10 more minutes, but Kani still hadn't returned. Then, her sister started calling her. The first call went unanswered, and the second one was sent to voicemail. This was unusual, and Elsie and Pearlie immediately sensed that something was wrong. They quickly went to the parking lot, where they were shocked to find that Kani's car was no longer there. They searched the parking lot several times to make sure, and after confirming that the car was indeed gone, they realized that Kani must have disappeared along with it. Pearlie was certain that something had happened to her daughter, as Kani would never leave without saying anything. Although the parking lot was poorly lit, it had surveillance cameras that might provide some clues about what had happened. The mall security initially refused to show Kani's relatives the footage, but relented after her mother begged for their help. At midnight, Pearlie and Elsie sat in front of a monitor and watched the shocking footage, which confirmed their worst fears. The footage revealed Kenny's car speeding out of the underground parking lot, crashing through the barrier. Although the footage quality was poor, it was evident that a man was driving, with Kenny in the passenger seat. Her body was positioned as if she was trying to distance herself from the driver, leaning against the door. Upon seeing the footage, Pearlie immediately filed a disappearance and kidnapping report at a police station. The police launched an investigation, while Kenny's family and friends drove around Kuala Lumpur, desperately searching for her purple proton tiara. Meanwhile, Brandon, Kenny's husband, began to feel a sense of unease. He tried calling his wife multiple times, but she didn't answer. He then contacted her mother, who informed him about the events that had transpired. The news of Kenny's disappearance left Brandon in shock. Pearlie could hear him sobbing over the phone. As dawn broke, Kenny's friends and family reluctantly returned home, their search efforts having yielded no results. The police disseminated information about the disappearance and conducted their own search, but unfortunately, it didn't lead to any breakthroughs. Even the footage from the mall's parking lot where Kenny was kidnapped failed to provide any leads on identifying the driver of the car. More than 72 hours have passed since Kenny's loved ones last saw her. Authorities believe that if she was kidnapped, it wasn't for ransom. If money was the motive, the kidnapper would have demanded it by now. A disturbing find was made by police when they discovered Kenny's car left empty on a city street. The front right tire was severely damaged, indicating it had been driven on while flat for some time, causing it to shred. In the back of the car, a large red stain was found on the passenger seat. Forensic experts collected evidence, including scrapings from the back seat, fingerprints from the steering wheel, and other parts of the car. There were many clues found in the vehicle. Kenny's family and friends held on to hope and prayed for her safe return. However, their hopes were crushed the next day after her car was found. On June 17th, a road worker detected a strong, foul smell coming from a manhole near the highway. Upon lifting the lid, he discovered a body that someone had attempted to burn using 2 car tires and sticks. A team of leading forensic experts from the Royal Malaysian Police immediately arrived at the scene. They found 2 car tires filled with concrete, which had been used as stands for road signs, lying on top of the body. It appeared that whoever had hidden the body, trying to make it harder to identify. Although the discovery of the body seemed to confirm the family's worst fears, Kenny's mother, Pearlie, refused to believe that her daughter was dead without official confirmation. "Until they confirm it, we will continue to hope that she will turn up alive," she said. The family went to the morgue, but the doctor said that they couldn't confirm the identity of the body yet. Kenny's family members provided DNA samples for comparative analysis. Unfortunately, the results confirmed their worst nightmare. The body was indeed that of their daughter, Kenny. Some sources claim that before the DNA test results, Kenny's family identified the jewelry on the body. However, as a loving mother, Pearlie held on to the hope that her daughter was still alive until the very end. The emotional torture she endured is unimaginable. The autopsy revealed that Kenny had 2 stab wounds to her abdomen, and a medical forensics expert found signs of strangulation. A cloth was tied around her neck in multiple knots, and semen was found inside her body, which served as a source of DNA. A few days after the body was discovered, an incident raised questions about the work of police. An undercover policeman, Subramaniam Ravichandran, reported to his superiors that on the night of Kenny's disappearance, he was on duty with his partner, patrolling the streets of Kuala Lumpur at night on their motorcycles. Both officers were dressed in civilian clothes. They noticed a car parked incorrectly, taking up half the road, and stopped to investigate if anyone was inside. Ravichandran approached the driver's door and saw a man behind the wheel with a woman in the passenger seat. He knocked on the window, and when the man lowered it partially, Ravichandran displayed his police ID and asked what they were doing. The driver replied they were just chatting and not doing anything illegal. Ravichandran then requested to see their IDs. As the driver handed over the documents, she in the passenger seat made unusual hand gestures, seemingly asking for help, but stopped whenever her assumed boyfriend looked at her. Noticing this, Ravichandran asked the driver to step out of the car. However, the driver responded aggressively, claiming Ravichandran was not a police officer but a thief. He then raised the window and reached for the ignition. Realizing the car might drive off, Ravichandran drew his pistol and shot the right front wheel. Despite this, the car sped away. Ravichandran and his partner pursued on a motorcycle but were unable to catch up, which is puzzling given the car had a flat tire. At the time, the Malaysian Police Department was in a state of disarray, which might explain why the officer didn't call for backup or report the incident. The car with a flat tire was a purple Proton Tiara, driven by 27-year-old Ahmad Najib bin Aris, accompanied by a woman named Kani Alm. Although the police chase did not result in an immediate arrest, the officers managed to obtain documents from the driver. Tragically, Kani Alm was later found dead. It is possible that if the officer had acted differently during the encounter, the outcome might have been different. Unfortunately, Ravichandran only informed his superiors about the incident after Kani's body was discovered. The only positive outcome of that night was that the police had obtained documents that could help identify the suspect. Besides Kani's family, many Malaysians attended her farewell ceremony. Her death was a devastating loss for her husband, Brandon. Meanwhile, the police launched a search for Ahmad Najib. They discovered that he didn't live at the address listed in his documents, but his name was genuine, providing multiple leads to track him down. The police searched for Ahmad Najib's name in the Registry of Documented Marriages and the National Agency of Social Support. They found a match, revealing that Ahmad Najib bin Aris was born and raised in Muar, Malaysia. He was the second of 4 siblings and had dropped out of school to work and support his family. In 1998, he moved from Muar to Kuala Lumpur, where he got married and had 2 children. Since 2000, he had worked as a cabin cleaner for Malaysia Airlines. Knowing the name of Ahmad Najib's wife and her workplace, the police began surveillance. She worked at a metropolitan bank, and after her shift ended, undercover police officers followed her to determine her home address. Now that they knew where Ahmad Najib lived, the police had to ensure he was inside the house without alerting him. For 3 days, they monitored the house, but Ahmad Najib didn't appear. At one point, investigators doubted whether Ahmad Najib still lived with his family, but this was a hasty conclusion. On the 4th day of surveillance, at around 4 a.m., a cab pulled up to the house, and Ahmad Najib stepped out. Within a minute, he was handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. News of the arrest and the suspect's identity quickly reached the press. Many people who knew Ahmad Najib were shocked to learn that he was suspected of kidnapping and killing Kani Alm. Those who knew him described Ahmad Najib as a devoted husband, a caring father of 2, and an overall good person. However, investigators soon discovered that he may have been hiding a darker side. During the initial interrogation, Ahmad Najib remained calm and requested to speak only with the head of the Criminal Investigation Division. It wasn't until he was presented with evidence linking him to Kani Alm that Ahmad Najib began to deny any wrongdoing. His confidence seemed to wane as the evidence mounted. Investigators showed him 2 IDs that he had given to an officer on the night of Kani Alm's kidnapping. They also revealed that they had found bloodstains on his jacket and jeans, which DNA analysis would likely confirm to be Kani Alm's blood. After realizing the officers had solid evidence and were not bluffing, Ahmad Najib confessed to kidnapping and killing Kani Alm. Within 10 days of the kidnapping, on June 23, 2003, he was taken to court, where he repeated his confession. The police then conducted an investigative experiment where Ahmad Najib showed them all the locations he had been with Kani Aung. He provided a detailed account of how he forced her to be intimate with him multiple times, how he took her life, and how he attempted to dispose of her body. Evidence supporting his statements was found at all the locations he led the police to. The investigation began at the underground parking lot, where cameras captured footage of Ahmad Najib. According to his statement, he was waiting for his former boss, who had fired him and whom he sought revenge against. However, the claim about the former boss was never verified. Hiding in the darkness, he observed Kani Aung searching for something in her car and seized the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. He forcefully pushed her into the car, issuing threats that if she attempted to escape or seek help, she would face dire consequences. Overwhelmed, Kani Aung became disoriented and obediently followed his instructions. Next, he took the driver's seat and sped out of the parking lot. After crashing through a barrier, he stopped in an industrial area, where he began to harass Kani Aung. Just as this was happening, a plainclothes police officer approached the car. Ahmad Najib falsely told the officer that he didn't know he had taken the wrong person until the officer asked him and his victim for their identification. Even assuming Ahmad Najib had intended to kidnap his former boss, his guilt remains unchanged. Undoubtedly, his former boss would have suffered the same fate as Kani Aung. According to Ahmad Najib's account, he managed to evade the pursuing officer. Despite the officer possessing his documents, Ahmad Najib failed to consider releasing Kani Aung. Instead, he stopped the car on the street to replace a tire damaged by a bullet. Nearby, a car containing a woman was parked at the spot where he had pulled over. He approached she and asked for a car jack, intending to change his tire. However, he noticed Kani Aung signaling to she, who then handed him the jack. He abandoned the idea of changing the tire and drove off immediately. Later, he stopped at a secluded area and used a knife to threaten Kani Aung, forcing her to engage in intimate acts with him. Afterwards, he drove to another district where he coerced Kani Aung into satisfying him again, with both of them in the back seat. Kani Aung pleaded for mercy, but he took her life instead. He then disposed of her body in a manhole near a highway, moved the car to another location, and left it there. 16 hours later, he returned to the scene with a gasoline canister in an attempt to conceal evidence of the crime. DNA analysis confirmed that the semen found in Kani Aung's body belonged to Ahmad Najib bin Aris. His DNA was also discovered in the car, along with his fingerprints, providing further irrefutable proof of his guilt. Additionally, the analysis revealed that the blood on his jacket and jeans belonged to Kani Aung. The trial began on September 15, 2003, 3 months after Kani Aung's death. This high-profile case drew widespread attention from the Malaysian media and public. The trial attracted not only ordinary Malaysians and journalists but also individuals seeking to boost their reputation, including numerous attorneys representing Ahmad Najib. Despite admitting guilt during the investigation, overwhelming evidence, including DNA proof, Ahmad Najib changed his stance after consulting 6 attorneys. At his first trial, he claimed his confession was made under police pressure. However, the judge before whom Ahmad Najib confessed immediately after his arrest testified that there were no signs of physical abuse, and Ahmad Najib appeared calm and relaxed. The attorneys then shifted their strategy, arguing that Kani Aung was in the car with Ahmad Najib voluntarily. They suggested that Kani Aung, a black belt in Taekwondo, should have attempted to escape if she were being held against her will. However, this attempt to blame Kani Aung was rejected, as people respond differently to critical situations. However, another claim surfaced, stating that Kani Aung had consensual intimacy with Ahmad Najib and that Kani Aung's death was caused by strangulation used to heighten the experience. Forensic experts disagreed with and rejected this account of what happened. The cloth around Canny's neck was tied in multiple knots, suggesting that Canny Ong had no intention of loosening it. Indeed, the cloth was so tight that the skin beneath was the only area on the body not affected by the fire. Furthermore, the cloth was a type used for cleaning plain windows, and given the defendant's job as a cabin cleaner, this linked him more closely to the crime. Additionally, the lawyers struggled to explain the stab wounds on Canny's body. At this point, Ahmad Najib's attorneys advised him to remain silent and not testify. Many questioned why Canny didn't escape the car when she had at least 2 chances to do so. On February 23, 2005, Ahmad Najib bin Aris was convicted of all charges connected to the crime committed against Canny Ong. The evidence pointed to him as the sole perpetrator. Ahmad Najib received the maximum sentence under Malaysian law, 20 years imprisonment and 10 strokes of the cane for violating Canny Ong's sexual integrity, plus the death penalty for causing her death. In Malaysia, the death penalty is carried out by hanging, a method that differs significantly from the lethal injection used in some other countries, such as the USA. Ahmad Najib's lawyers attempted to appeal the sentence twice but were unsuccessful both times. In 2010, Ahmad Najib petitioned the head of state to commute his death sentence to life imprisonment, maintaining his innocence. However, his plea for clemency was rejected. More than 13 years after Canny Ong's death, on September 23, 2016, Ahmad Najib's sentence was carried out. He was 40 years old at the time of his execution. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Cat West. Cat West was born on February 15, 1975, in the small town of Davie, Florida. She was the only child of Nancy and John Jonathan Martin. As a child, Cat always wanted a sibling, but her mother's health problems made that impossible. This has made Cat West so attached to her dolls, she treats them like living creatures, sings to them and cherishes them. Cat West was a popular student in school, admired for her good looks and friendly personality. She was very active in extracurricular activities, particularly sports and dance. However, during the teenage years, signs of bipolar affective disorder begin to appear, characterized by depression and anxiety, alternating with periods of hyperactivity, persistently elevated mood and agitation. Only later did her parents realize their daughter's condition, but it was too late. By then, she had turned to alcohol to cope with her emotions. It wasn't until she sought treatment for her addiction that doctors discovered the underlying issue, a bipolar disorder. Despite overcoming her dependency on alcohol, managing her bipolar disorder proved to be a much more daunting task. She was on multiple medications, which caused unpleasant side effects and made her feel unwell. Eventually, the disorder was brought under control, but Cat West had to continue taking medication. Cat West wants to get married and have children, but her personal life is full of hardship, possibly due to her past mental illness and addiction. However, Cat West is a charismatic and attractive person, has many admirers, is often the life of the party and shines in the spotlight. Growing up, Cat West aspired to be a model. She actively pursued her goal, spending time attending auditions and exploring different looks. She was especially attracted to Marilyn Monroe, an actress of the style of the 1950s. Cat West has watched many of Monroe's films, collected her posters and imitated her style and image. Interestingly, Cat West bore a resemblance to her idol, which she proudly acknowledged and cherished. Although her dream of becoming a famous model didn't come true, Cat West's photos were frequently published in local magazines, earning her some recognition, a fan base, and occasional recognition on the streets of her hometown. At the age of 28, she met her life partner, William Jeffrey West. William was born in 1970 in Alabama, came from a typical family. From a young age, he had aspirations of a career in the military or law enforcement. As a diligent student and active sports enthusiast, he was robust, fit, and incredibly focused. In the early 1990s, William joined the U.S. military, initially serving as a military police officer. His dedication led to a promotion as a military recruiter, responsible for enlisting individuals into the Army and Navy. He was eventually promoted to head of a recruiting unit, spending 20 years of his life in military service. William pursued higher education alongside his military career, earning a bachelor's degree in public relations from the University of South Carolina. He then went on to study criminal justice, eventually earning a master's degree. William is a calm and goal-oriented person who likes to keep a low profile. He was a devoted family man, marrying young and having 2 children. After retiring from the military, he became a corporal in the police department of a university town, where he was responsible for ensuring the safety of the campus community. He approached his duties with seriousness and responsibility, never having to use his service firearm throughout his career. Cat West and William first met in the mid-2000s, when William was still serving in the military and married to his first wife. Despite their vastly different personalities, William is a quiet and serious military man, and Cat West is a bubbly and outgoing blonde, and they feel an immediate attraction to each other. In 2004, William, a married man at the time, met Cat West. Despite their 5-year age gap and Cat West struggles with alcohol addiction, but they quickly fell in love. William soon filed for divorce to be with Cat West, and in less than 5 months, they got married in Las Vegas in 2005. After getting married, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Lola. They moved to Sarah, Alabama, William's home state, where Cat designed their custom-built home, adorning their bedroom with portraits of her idol, Marilyn Monroe. Neighbors described the Williams as a happy couple, despite their very different personalities. Cat West was known for her bold fashion sense, always striving to look stunning and attractive. She loved being the center of attention, often seeking compliments and admiring glances. In contrast, William appeared more reserved and serious, a trait likely developed during his long military career. Cat West's life is a complete contrast to her glamorous appearance and her everyday reality as a housewife. Despite her efforts to make it big in modeling, her career failed to take off after her marriage and the birth of her daughter. Focusing on creating a cozy home and raising her children became her top priorities. However, her domestic life wasn't fulfilling, and she yearned for attention and recognition. With the emergence of social media in the late 2000s, she began sharing pictures online. She was inspired by Barbie and Marilyn Monroe, but gradually became more daring and provocative. Her husband was surprisingly supportive of her new hobby, often serving as her photographer. Eventually, the hobby became a profitable business, earning her income through paid subscriptions. A typical evening found they shopping for prepared seafood, fine brandy, and absinthe from a local supermarket. They would pick out scented candles from a nearby store to set the mood for a romantic evening. Surveillance cameras caught them seemingly carefree and happy as they made their purchases, unaware of the tragedy that was about to happen. After a fun dinner and a few drinks, Cat West began transforming into her online persona, Kitty Cat. She asked Williams to take some intimate photos of her, first in lingerie and then without clothes. Williams agreed and took several revealing shots, which were later posted on Cat West's private online profile, accessible only to her fans. A romantic evening that seemed to end in a night of passion instead led to a tragic ending. The next morning, January 13th, around 5 a.m., a young neighbor of the Williams was on her way to work. Although the sun had not yet risen, it was light enough outside for her to notice something unusual as she passed the Williams house. At first, she didn't realize what it was, but as she slowed down, she saw a nearly naked woman lying motionless on the road. She also thought she saw someone standing on the doorstep of the house, but they quickly disappeared into the shadows when they noticed her approaching. During questioning, the neighbor was unable to definitively state whether she saw Cat West's attacker enter the house or flee down the street. The neighbor, who was shocked and unsure of what to do, hesitated to approach the body. After returning home, she informed her parents, and together they called emergency services to report the distressing discovery. At the operator's request, the neighbor reluctantly approached the body while waiting for help to arrive. She identified the body as Cat West and checked for a pulse, but unfortunately, there was none. Cat West's body was cold and stiff. Cat West was found lying face down on the sidewalk, wearing only a bright pink bra top. There was a pool of blood under her head. Nearby was a bottle of wormwood wine with some of the wine spilled on the road and blood stains on the bottle. A short distance away lay her smashed smartphone. Due to the quiet residential area, there were no other witnesses to the incident, which remains shrouded in mystery. Cat West's car was last seen around 8:30 p.m. and the time her body was discovered at 5 a.m. A key figure who may be able to shed some light on the events is Cat West's husband, Mr. Williams. The investigation is ongoing, with Detective Michael Melhoff being one of the first to arrive at the scene. When the detective arrived at the house where Cat West's body was found, Williams answered the door. He seemed anxious but claimed he didn't know what was going on. When asked about his wife's whereabouts, Williams said he had just woken up and couldn't find her in bed. The detective then told him that a woman's body, identified by neighbors as Cat West, had been found near the house. The man put on a jacket and followed the detective outside, where he confirmed that the body was indeed his wife. However, his reaction was surprisingly calm. He didn't show any extreme emotions, such as crying or screaming, which raised some suspicions. When questioned about his whereabouts and activities during the night, he said he had slept soundly because they had been drinking the previous evening. When asked what he thought might have happened to his wife, he simply shrugged and suggested it could have been an accident. The man also shared some information about his wife's medical history. He said she had bipolar disorder and took medication for it. He also mentioned that she struggled with alcohol and sometimes behaved erratically when she was drunk. He noted that she would occasionally jump on their backyard trampoline, but sometimes missed it and injured herself. A search of the house did not turn up any signs of a struggle or violence. However, some items in the kitchen suggested a recent gathering. 2 plates with leftover food, 2 glasses, and a half-empty brandy bottle were on the kitchen table. Under the table, police found Cat West's high heels and a pair of panties the same color as her bra lying on the floor. However, some bloody napkins in the trash and an open bottle of detergent raised suspicions. Williams claimed that on the evening in question, Cat West had been drinking heavily, which he disliked. After a photo session, he wanted to move to the bedroom for a more intimate setting. He took a short shower and returned to find Cat West still sitting at the table, drinking absinthe straight from the bottle and texting someone on her phone. Williams was angry that she ignored his requests to put away her phone, and he tried to take it from her. A minor scuffle ensued, during which he accidentally elbowed Cat West's face, causing her nose to bleed. Williams explained that the blood on the discarded napkins could have been the blood from his wife's nose that night. He stated that he took the phone from his wife and threw it out the door. Believing his wife would calm down and join him in bed, he claimed to have been unaware of what happened next until the police arrived at his door asking about Cat West. Williams speculated that his wife might have gone outside to retrieve her phone and brought the absinthe bottle with her to finish it. He suggested 2 possible scenarios: 1, that she fell, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and froze to death, or 2, that someone attacked her. However, he could not explain why his wife went out wearing only a bra without any clothes. He attributed this behavior to her being intoxicated from the absinthe. Williams's story raised suspicions due to its inconsistencies and lack of detail, which he attributed to intoxication. However, the investigation was hampered by lack of evidence and no witnesses. The autopsy revealed that the 42-year-old woman died from a severe head injury, likely caused by the absinthe bottle found nearby, combined with hypothermia. Her blood alcohol level was extremely high, suggesting severe intoxication can impair breathing and increase the risk of loss of consciousness. Initially, it seemed that the circumstances of Kat West's death were straightforward. She had been heavily intoxicated, gone outside to search for her phone, and taken the unfinished bottle of absinthe with her. It appeared that she might have lost her balance while reaching for her phone, fallen, hit her head on the bottle, lost consciousness, and ultimately died from the injury and exposure. The presence of the blood-stained bottle near her head and the phone nearby seemed to support this scenario. Yet, the investigation discovered that this explanation was overly simplistic and potentially staged. Experts determined that the head injury was caused by the bottle found next to the body. However, forensic analysis revealed that if the victim had fallen by herself, the bottle would likely have rolled away from her head, rather than remaining parallel to it. The bottle was found to have both Kat West's and her husband Williams's fingerprints on it, as well as some unidentified smudged prints. Further investigation led to a different conclusion. The theory presented in court suggested that Kat West and Williams had an argument. In a fit of anger, Williams allegedly struck her with the bottle, causing a fatal injury. Panicked, he attempted to stage an accidental fall and cleaned up the blood in the house, but failed to dispose of all the evidence. Evidence supporting this theory included a fitness app on Williams's phone, which tracked his movements. The app showed that Williams was active in the house until midnight and again early in the morning before the police arrived. This contradicted his claim of being asleep, leading police to speculate that he was trying to conceal evidence during these times. A neighbor who discovered the body recalled seeing a male silhouette on the doorstep of the house in the early morning hours. However, due to the dim light, she couldn't be certain if it was Williams or someone else. She also couldn't determine if the person entered the house. This information piqued the investigators' interest, especially given Kat West's online persona, Kitty Cat, which had attracted many male admirers who paid to see her revealing photos. This theory suggests that a highly devoted fan may have been responsible. As a homemaker, Kat West often received messages from various men, including some with inappropriate proposals. However, she kept her distance, and there were no explicit threats or harassment found in their communications. A few persistent fans who lived in other states were quickly ruled out as suspects. Despite this, mysterious footprints were found on the doorstep, which didn't belong to the homeowners, but they vanished on the lawn, and their origin remained unknown. Friends, relatives, and neighbors described the Williams family as a happy couple, and he knew her online activities under the name Kitty Cat. While some might have seen it as unusual, he treated it as harmless fun. Their social circle was unaware of Kat West's online persona, just as most of her followers didn't know her real-life identity. Williams firmly denied ever abusing his wife, saying he loved her so much that harming her was impossible. However, they frequently argued, and a text exchange from January 12 revealed a heated dispute. Kat West criticized Williams for not matching her energy and temperament, suggesting they might be incompatible. Despite the lack of direct evidence, Williams remained the prime suspect. Following his arrest, his family and defense attorneys rallied to his defense, believing he was innocent. They insisted that he could never hurt his wife. After his arrest, Williams was unable to afford the $500,000 bail and had to stay in custody until his trial, which took almost 3 years. He was offered a plea deal, admitting guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence, but he refused, maintaining his innocence. The trial, which began in November 2020, drew significant media attention. This publicity put pressure on the judges and jurors. By this time, the possibility of a third party's involvement in Kat West's death was no longer considered. The prosecution argued that all the evidence indicated that Williams was responsible for his wife Cat West's death. They believed that, fueled by jealousy and intoxicated, he hit her with a bottle, causing fatal injuries. In an attempt to cover his tracks, they suggested he staged the scene to look like an accident and removed evidence from the house. In contrast, Williams's defense team claimed that Cat West's death was an accident. They pointed out that her extremely high blood alcohol levels would have impaired her balance and coordination. Cat West's mother testified in support of Williams, describing her daughter as eccentric but stressing that Williams loved her unconditionally and would never harm her. She also appealed to the court to consider the well-being of their child, Lola, who had already lost her mother and now risked losing her father. On January 11, 2021, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for involuntary manslaughter. As a result, Williams received the maximum sentence of 13 years in prison, taking into account the time he had already served. Notably, if he had accepted the initial plea deal offered to him, he may have already been a free man by now. Unfortunately, all of Williams's appeals, led by his lawyers, have been unsuccessful thus far. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Jessica Patel. Jessica Patel was born on September 16, 1983, in Leeds, West Yorkshire, England, where she grew up in a traditional Hindu community. As the eldest child, she developed a diligent and obedient nature from a young age. Jessica excelled academically, helped with household chores, and maintained a bright and cheerful personality. Jessica had a large social circle, but she was particularly close to a boy 3 years her senior, who was more reserved and shy. They often spent time together, and as Jessica matured, she blossomed into a beautiful young woman. Like many of her peers, she longed to find true love and build a happy family, much like the characters in her favorite movies. However, her romantic aspirations did not detract from her intelligence and determination. To achieve her goals, Jessica pursued higher education. In 2002, she enrolled at De Montfort University in Leicester, and 4 years later, she began studying pharmacy at the University of Manchester. There, she reconnected with Mitesh, an acquaintance who coincidentally attended the same faculty. They initially had no romantic feelings for each other, but over time, it turned into true love. This relationship has helped Mitesh grow and become more confident in himself. He is also accumulating knowledge and becoming more mature. Mitesh was extremely kind and caring towards Jessica, showering her with compliments and gifts. However, their happiness was short-lived. Jessica's mother passed away due to an incurable illness, leaving her devastated. Mitesh stood by Jessica's side, providing emotional support and comfort during this difficult time. As a result, their bond grew stronger. Jessica confided in her sister that she had finally found a trustworthy partner. Mitesh seemed perfect in every way, and she envisioned a happy marriage. In 2008, Mitesh asked Jessica's father for permission to marry her, following traditional Hindu customs. Although her father had reservations about Mitesh and felt that they were too young to get married, Jessica convinced him otherwise. They eventually got married in July 2009. The wedding was held in the beautiful garden of the bride's home. Initially, the newlyweds, Mitesh and Jessica, seemed like a perfect couple. However, things took a turn for the worse soon after. Mitesh's behavior changed dramatically. He became distant and cold, leaving Jessica feeling lonely. Their intimate life also suffered, and they didn't have any physical relationship for about 10 months after their wedding. This was very distressing for Jessica, who couldn't understand why Mitesh's feelings towards her had changed so drastically. Jessica tried to find fault in herself, wondering if she was the reason for Mitesh's change in. Meanwhile, she had just graduated from university in 2010 and was looking forward to starting her career as a pharmacist. She has a good education and a promising career. However, Mitesha's attitude continued to deteriorate. He became increasingly controlling and suspicious, constantly monitoring Jessica's every move. In February, her family suffered another grief. Her grandfather falls ill, his health begins to decline rapidly, and death seems inevitable. Manal's husband does not allow Jessica to spend much time with her family. This was the root of the conflict between they. When Manal confronted her husband about this, he became angry and responded by punching her in the face. As a result, when her grandfather was seriously ill, Jessica was only able to visit him a few times. Jessica comes from a traditional Indian family where his word is the law, restricting her from making her own choices. She felt trapped in a lonely marriage. One day, she confided in her family about her concerns. She expressed her suspicion that her husband, Mitesh, was being unfaithful. She noticed that whenever he received a phone call, he would excuse himself to another room. Additionally, he often stayed up late, spending hours alone, which further fueled her doubts. In 2012, Jessica's suspicions about her husband's infidelity were confirmed when she discovered romantic messages on his phone. Seeking help, she confided in Mitesha's cousin, with whom she had a good relationship. Instead of offering help or advice, the cousin blamed Jessica for her husband's behavior, implying that she was responsible for his infidelity. This response from Mitesha's cousin left Jessica feeling isolated and unsupported. To make matters worse, Mitesh also prohibited her from seeking comfort from her own sisters. It became clear that Mitesh was hiding something and trying to maintain his reputation and authority within the family and local community. In 2014, Mitesh and Jessica relocated to Lynor, a suburb of Middlesbrough in North Yorkshire, in an effort to start anew and distance themselves from their family. They purchased a large house, made renovations, and later opened their own pharmacy. Jessica had hoped that this fresh start would bring positive changes to their relationship. While their relationship did improve slightly, one thing was still missing: children. For 6 years, Jessica struggled with infertility, and Mitesh made veiled threats that he would leave her if she didn't become pregnant. In October 2015, she decided to go through in vitro fertilization. However, the initial attempts were unsuccessful, causing her to become increasingly anxious and depressed, especially with the added stress of hormone treatments. To make matters worse, Mitesh's behavior changed. He became distant and cold towards her at home. He would only show affection in public, and even then, it seemed superficial. He was often preoccupied with his phone, and the tension between them became unbearable. She reached her breaking point and suggested they separate, confessing that she was unhappy in the marriage. Mitesha's response caught her off guard. He claimed to love her and promised that things would improve over time. He even suggested that having a baby would strengthen their family bond. Jessica believed his words. For a moment she felt comforted and listened to, and her doubts subsided. On May 9, 2018, Mitesh and Jessica Patel received the exciting news that 3 of their embryos had been successfully fertilized, with a transfer scheduled for the following month. Jessica was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a mother and eagerly shared the news with her family. Tragically, their happiness was short-lived. A few days later, on the evening of May 14, 2018, Mitesh Patel made a frantic call to the emergency services, reporting that he had found his wife's body at their home. He claimed that he had left the house earlier to buy food and pick up his laptop from work. When he returned home, he found that the house had been burglarized and Jessica was lying unconscious on the living room floor. Mitesh told police that Jessica's skin was cold to the touch and there were bruises on her neck. He was clearly distressed, crying as he spoke. The police assured him that rescuers were on the way. When the officers arrived, they found Jessica's body on the living room floor, her wrists and ankles bound with duct tape. A grocery bag was nearby. Despite the medical team's efforts, Jessica died on the scene. The investigators sought to determine the motive behind the heinous crime. Upon examination, they found that the house had been thoroughly ransacked, with drawers and closets turned upside down. It was evident that the perpetrators had been searching for valuables, as they had even torn apart their bed mattress. The missing jewelry and cash further supported the notion that the primary motive was robbery. Jessica's husband, Mitesh, also believed that their house had been targeted by robbers. According to Mitesh's statement, on the day of the incident, he followed his usual routine, working a morning shift, going to the gym, and returning home afterward. His wife came home around 7 p.m. Later, Mitesh decided to order pizza and left the house at 7:44 p.m. Surveillance footage from a nearby pizzeria corroborated his alibi. Before leaving the pizzeria, he tried to call his wife to tell her he was on his way home, but no one picked up. Mitesh stopped at a pharmacy without notice, so he returned home later than expected. When Mitesh returned home at 8:50 p.m., he was met with a gruesome scene. His wife was bound, and their belongings were scattered everywhere. Neighbors was left reeling after the tragic event. This neighborhood is known as a wealthy and peaceful place, and has never had a crime before. The autopsy report revealed that Jessica's cause of death was strangulation, with the attacker using a bag, bare hands, and an electrical cord to ensure her demise. Since there were no signs of forced entry, investigators initially suspected that Jessica knew her attacker and had let them into the house. Jessica's family quickly arrived and comforted Mitesh, who appeared to be extremely sad and lost over the passing of his wife. However, the police had their suspicions, and a thorough search of the house uncovered some crucial clues that would eventually lead to the capture and trial of the perpetrator. A health monitoring app on Jessica's phone also played an important role in finding the truth. 3 days after Jessica's murder, the lead investigator contacted her father, who was still near the crime scene, and asked him and other relatives to return home so as not to interfere with the ongoing investigation. The investigator promised to provide more information later. Meanwhile, detectives were preparing to arrest the prime suspect in the case, Mitesh Patel. Several key pieces of evidence had led them to this conclusion. During the search of the crime scene, police found a damaged hard drive from a surveillance camera installed in front of the front door. The device was discovered in a suitcase under the bed. Further investigation uncovered a hidden photograph in their nightstand that showed Mitesh embracing another man, named Amit. Additionally, footage from a camera across the street revealed that only Mitesh and Jessica entered and exited their home on the day of the murder, May 14th. The footage shows that Mitesh returned home at 3:30 p.m. Jessica arrived home from work at 7 p.m., and Mitesh left the house briefly to pick up pizza at 7:44 p.m., returning at 8:50 p.m. Since no one else was seen entering or leaving the house, the evidence pointed to one conclusion: Mitesh was the likely perpetrator. Mitesh was the prime suspect in the investigation, but the police lacked concrete evidence against him. As the detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a shocking secret that Mitesh had carefully kept hidden. Jessica had suspected that her husband was being unfaithful, and her instincts were correct. However, it was not what she expected. Mitesh was hiding his true sexual orientation. His marriage to Jessica was just a cover, a way to hide his true feelings for other men. 2 years into their marriage, Mitesh met Amit, an Indian man who was openly gay. Despite their cultural differences, they men quickly fell in love and secretly met each other whenever Mitesh was away on business. Unbeknownst to Jessica, her husband was leading a double life, pretending to be the perfect spouse while carrying on an illicit affair. In 2016, Amit moved to Australia, but Amit and Mitesh continued their relationship. Mitesh had had a plan to become same-sex parents with Amit by using Jessica's embryos and finding a surrogate. Mitesh had informed Amit that Jessica was having in vitro fertilization, IVF, and had asked if they could be together after this plan, to which Amit had replied that it would depend on the results. Mitesh confided in Amit, stating that eventually there would be no more obstacles in their relationship. In a message, Mitesh chillingly wrote, "Jessica's days are numbered." It was later discovered that Mitesh was secretly taking fertility-affecting medication to avoid intimate relations with Jessica. The investigation revealed that Mitesh's internet search history was reconstructed. He had searched for "how to get rid of his wife," Hindu funeral, and procedure for obtaining insurance payments for the murder of a spouse. Notably, Jessica had a £2 million life insurance policy. After her death, Mitesh planned to claim the money and use it to buy a property in Australia. In the weeks leading up to Jessica's death, Mitesh had been actively searching for a new home, aiming to create a comfortable environment for his future family. Investigators analyzed their cell phones and found incriminating messages. They also discovered a fitness app that tracked the number of steps taken by Jessica's. The data showed that Jessica's phone had not moved since 8:04 p.m. However, 15 minutes later, the phone recorded 14 steps, suggesting that either Jessica had made her last movements or someone had moved the device. In contrast, Mitesh's phone data revealed high physical activity and an elevated heart rate in the period leading up to his wife's murder, which was unusual for him. Between 7:44 p.m. and 8:30 p.m., Jessica's husband, Mitesh, walked up and down the stairs multiple times, creating false evidence of a burglary by throwing objects around the house. Before calling 911, he went upstairs to conceal evidence, including a hard drive from a surveillance camera in the safe of the pharmacy he and his wife owned. During the police investigation, they found stolen jewelry, £25,000, and a couple of gold bars, which Mitesh claimed had been taken during the robbery. They also discovered a roll of duct tape similar to the one used to bind the victim's arms and legs. The torn end of the tape matched the piece taken as evidence from Jessica's body. To create an alibi, Mitesh had to go to his workplace the evening after the pizza party. Despite planning for years, he was remarkably careless and left a trail of evidence behind. Furthermore, DNA analysis found under Jessica's fingernails showed that it matched Mitesh's DNA. Mitesh had scratch marks on his neck, which he attributed to a fall. During the investigation and subsequent trial, Mitesh, the accused, denied any wrongdoing. He claimed that his interactions with Jessica were mere coincidence. The 3-week trial strung together the developments in the case. It was established that he attacked his wife as soon as she entered the house. She fought back and scratched the attacker but was eventually controlled. Initially, Mitesh had planned to kill his wife by administering the lethal dose of insulin. However, this method takes a long time to be effective and there is a risk that the plan will be discovered. To ensure a quicker outcome, Mitesh suffocated his wife by putting a bag over her head. To make sure his wife was dead, he strangled her with his hands and then used a rope. The prosecution presented physical evidence, including empty ampules found in Mitesh Patel's laptop bag, which linked him to the crime. Mitesh brutally murdered his wife, Jessica, in their home, a place they had shared for years. The entire ordeal took only 20 minutes. He then brutally tied her up to create the appearance that she had been robbed. Following the murder, Mitesh went about his day as usual, even stopping at a pizza place and calling Jessica's phone. The news of her death left both families in shock and disbelief. Tragically, Jessica had been seeking help in the months leading up to her murder, but her cries for aid were ignored. Only her sister seemed worried, but they couldn't do much to help either. The jury deliberated for 2 hours before delivering a guilty verdict. On December 5, 2018, the court sentenced Mitesh Patel to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Mitesh showed no remorse for his actions, and it seemed that the only person he felt sorry for was himself. The family was still grappling with the loss of Jessica's death, remembering her in their daily prayers and cherishing the happy moments they had shared together. It is unlikely that they will ever forgive Mitesh for his heinous crime. According to Hindu beliefs, her soul must be reborn. Since she suffered a lot in life and was unhappy but remained a good person, in the next incarnation, she will be rewarded. At least that was a comfort to her loved ones. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Celeste Mano. Celeste Mano was born on November 30th, 1997, in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. She was the youngest of two children to parents Eggy Diro and Tony Mano, and grew up with her older brother Alessandro. Although her parents separated when she was young, her father remained involved in her life, providing financial support and maintaining a relationship with his children. Celeste was a sociable and active student who enjoyed sports, dance. Initially, she wanted to become a lawyer and enrolled at the University of Melbourne to study criminal and civil law. However, she later lost interest in law and switched to studying advertising and marketing. In 2018, she landed a job at a rapidly growing e-commerce company. She rapidly advanced in her career, rising from a call center worker to the head of a department in just a few years. She was considered one of the company's most promising employees. Celeste has always been the center of attention, especially among men. However, she is very picky about her partners. Meanwhile, one of her colleagues, Louis Seiko, has had his eye on her since she started working at the company. He is almost 16 years older than her and has shown no signs of career ambition, remaining in the same subordinate position for many years. Despite his reserved nature, Louis Seiko was friendly and polite. He often asked Celeste out, but she consistently declined. Instead of taking the hint, Louis Seiko chose to view her rejections as a challenge or a game. He believed that Celeste was playing hard to get and was determined to win her over. Despite her clear lack of interest, Louis Seiko continued to try and draw her attention through various means. Celeste finds Louis Seiko's attention annoying, but she tries to keep her cool, hoping that he will eventually lose interest or focus on someone else. However, Louis Seiko's infatuation with Celeste grows stronger over time, becoming an obsession that everyone around him notices. Celeste confided in a close friend and colleague that she would never consider a romantic relationship with Louis Seiko due to several reasons. Firstly, she found him odd and unpredictable. Secondly, she was not attracted to men lacking ambition and life goals. Lastly, their significant age difference was also a factor. Despite feeling pity for Louis Seiko, she knew he had no chance with her. Louis Seiko's relentless pursuit of Celeste led to a critical mistake: he neglected his work duties. As a result, his productivity plummeted, which did not go unnoticed by senior management. Louis Seiko received 3 reprimands and warnings before being dismissed in early autumn 2019. As he gathered his belongings in the office, he appeared on the verge of tears, clearly devastated by the outcome. Celeste is relieved when Louis Seiko finally leaves her alone, but she also feels guilty, thinking that her actions contributed to his firing. Mano, as a department manager, thanked Louis Seiko for his years of service and escorted Louis Seiko out of the building. As they parted, he patted Louis Seiko on the back and sincerely wished him luck. The dismissed employee, Louis Seiko, came to a surprising realization. He thought Celeste was hesitant to pursue an office romance because she was his superior, and it might harm her career. Now, Louis Seiko believed that there were no obstacles to their happiness, and they could be together. Overcome with emotion, Louis Seiko suddenly kissed Celeste on the cheek. Shocked by his bold move, Celeste was speechless. She quickly turned around and fled back into the office without saying a word. Louis Seiko misinterpreted her reaction, thinking that Celeste had feelings for him and that he shouldn't give up on pursuing her. After being fired, Louis Seiko created a social media account and sent Celeste a friend request, which she initially accepted. However, when he began asking her to meet up and go out, she politely declined and eventually blocked him. Undeterred, Louis Seiko created a new profile and sent her another friend request the next day. Celeste tried to ignore him, but he continued to comment on her photos, complimenting her appearance and suggesting they would make a great couple. To limit Louis Seiko contact, Celeste adjusted her profile settings to restrict messages, comments, and posts to only her friends. Despite this, a week later, she started receiving romantic messages from an unknown number, which she suspected were from Louis Seiko. The messages included poems he had written, admiring her beauty and trying to persuade her to go out with him. This was particularly concerning since Louis Seiko had never had her personal phone number during their time working together, and she had only communicated with him through work channels. Celeste initially tried to address the stalker by answering one of his calls. Celeste explained to him that there was no possibility of a relationship and urged him to stop contacting her. Unfortunately, Louis Seiko was not receptive to her message and instead continued to focus on how much he enjoyed hearing her voice. Despite Celeste's attempts to block him, Louis Seiko managed to circumvent this by calling from different numbers each time. Feeling harassed, Celeste eventually changed her phone number, but to her surprise, Louis Seiko was able to obtain her new number within a week. Celeste had been trying to protect herself from Louis Seiko, a crazed fan, for about 6 months. Despite blocking Louis Seiko's phone number and fake social media accounts, and ignoring his messages, the harassment continued. The messages escalated from romantic to bold and threatening, followed by demands to meet Celeste. Celeste had no idea that Louis Seiko had begun following her from work to her home, knowing her address. At first, she caught glimpses of Louis Seiko near her home, but Celeste assumed it was because she was too nervous. However, when she realized that Louis Seiko was actually following her, she knew she needed help. Celeste decided to seek police protection, hoping to obtain a restraining order that would prohibit the stalker from approaching her or her home. The police officers were unresponsive to Celeste's concerns, seeming to mock her request for help. They claimed that Louis Seiko had not done anything illegal, as writing explicit poems or fantasies in text messages is not against the law. Without evidence of Louis Seiko following or lurking near her home, Celeste was told to leave the police station. Celeste continued to be harassed by Louis Seiko on a regular basis. During the day, she would see his car parked across the street from her office, and at night, he would drive past her house several times. This constant presence made her feel uneasy. In August 2020, Celeste returned to the police station, this time providing photo and video evidence on her phone that showed Louis Seiko was indeed stalking her. A different officer took her statement and was more serious about the situation, expressing surprise at his colleague's previous indifference. He advised Celeste to go to court immediately, where a restraining order was issued against Louis Seiko, prohibiting him from contacting or approaching her in any way. Louis Seiko's sudden disappearance brought Celeste a sense of relief and freedom. However, that feeling did not last long. Less than a month later, she began receiving text messages from unknown numbers. The messages were from Louis Seiko, who initially begged her to retract his statement and drop the restraining order, arguing that it was interfering with their romantic relationship. Over time, his tone shifted from pleading to demanding. Celeste immediately reported the messages to the police, as Louis Seiko's actions were a clear violation of the restraining order. As a result, he was fined and warned that further violations would lead to severe consequences, including the possibility of jail time if he continued to harass her. After this incident, Louis Seiko remained silent for almost 2 months, leading Celeste to believe that he had finally left her alone. Celeste met Chris Reedsdale in September 2020, and they quickly discovered they shared many common interests. Life views and goals, which led to a romantic relationship. She confides in Chris about her harassment by Louis Seiko, who has been silent for over a month but still worries her. Chris made a conscious effort to make Celeste feel safe and supported, showering her with care and attention. A month later, in early November, Celeste decided it was time to introduce Chris to her family over dinner. Her family welcomed Chris warmly. The next few weeks passed peacefully, and Louise Seiko made no further attempts to contact Celeste. She was happy, spending all her free time with Chris, and it seemed that she had finally forgotten about worrying about Louise Seiko. On November 15, 2020, they went on a date to a cafe where they sat together, enjoying each other's company. Celeste offered to take a selfie to capture the moment. Celeste loved the photo so much that she decided to use it as her profile picture on social media. By doing so, she also wanted to share the news of her new relationship and make it clear that things were getting serious. Chris also posted the photo on his page, along with a heartfelt caption expressing his love for Celeste. Sadly, this date turned out to be their last. After dropping Celeste off at home, Chris said goodbye, planning to see her again the next day. Celeste spent about an hour in the kitchen with her mother Eggy, before going to bed early to get ready for work the next morning. On November 16, 2020, Eggy was suddenly awakened around 4 a.m. by the sound of breaking glass. At first, she thought the noise was coming from outside, but then she heard more suspicious sounds, including banging, screams, and commotion, which seemed to be coming from within her house. Eggy quickly got out of bed, put on her robe, and rushed to her daughter Celeste's room. As she opened the door, she saw someone jumping away from Celeste's bed and escaping through a broken window. When Eggy turned on the light, she was shocked to see her daughter lying in a pool of blood, covered in cuts and small shards of glass. Celeste was struggling to breathe, her eyes wide open and looking up. Eggy immediately called an ambulance and tried to stem the bleeding from her daughter's deep wounds while she waited for help to arrive. Tragically, despite their best efforts, Celeste passed away before police and paramedics arrived. The medical examiners found over 20 stab wounds on the victim's body, with the fatal blow being a wound to her heart. After investigating the scene and comparing it to Eggy's testimony, the police concluded that the attacker broke into the Celeste's room through the window and carried out the attack in under 3 minutes, before the Celeste's mother entered the room. The attacker used a large butcher's knife, striking randomly, and the Celeste tried to defend herself, as evidenced by the numerous cuts on her arms. When asked if the Celeste had any enemies, Eggy mentioned Louise Seiko, who had been harassing the victim with calls and threatening messages for over a year. This information was confirmed by other family members, friends, and colleagues. The suspect left behind a large number of bloody fingerprints at the scene, as well as DNA on a fence he jumped over while fleeing, which was likely due to an injury to his hand. As a result, it was crucial to detain and interrogate Louise Seiko immediately, as he was the prime suspect in the case, and to verify and compare all the evidence and witness statements. Louise Seiko was immediately taken into custody but initially claimed to be innocent, professing his love for Celeste and insisting he could never hurt her. However, forensic analysis quickly proved him wrong. His bloody fingerprints were found both in Celeste's room and on the fence surrounding her property, tying him to the crime scene. Investigation revealed a prior restraining order, which prohibited Louise Seiko from approaching Celeste. Notably, the night before the crime, he bought a hammer and large knife at a local hardware store. The store's security cameras caught him purchasing the tools at checkout. It later emerged that he used these tools to carry out the violent crime, smashing through a window to enter Celeste's house and fatally stabbing her with the knife. The case against Louise Seiko was overwhelming, with evidence showing he had been watching his victim for a long time and knew everything about her. The final straw was when she posted a photo of her new boyfriend on social media. After that, Louise Seiko bought a knife and hammer and snuck into the victim's home at night to harm her. His actions seemed deliberate and planned. Louis Seiko's personal life was marked by instability. At 39, he had never married, still lived with his parents, had few friends, and had trouble holding down a job. He also had a family history of mental health issues, with a brother serving a long prison sentence for a serious crime. Louis Seiko's lawyer arguing that he needed specialized treatment rather than imprisonment. However, this claim outraged the victim's family, who feared that Louis Seiko would escape punishment. The psychiatric experts ultimately concluded that while Louis Seiko did have mental health issues, he was fully aware of his actions when he committed the crime. He had planned the details in advance, which meant he would have to stand trial. The murder trial is set for the fall of 2023, 3 years after Celeste's tragic death. In the years leading up to the trial, Louis Seiko attempted to argue that he was mentally ill and not responsible for his actions. He spent much of that time in a psychiatric ward. During the trial, Louis Seiko remained calm and detached, seemingly uninterested in the proceedings. He admitted to his guilt but claimed that his intention was not to take Celeste's life, but rather to win her love. However, the jury unanimously found him guilty on all counts. As a result, he was sentenced to 36 years in prison, with the possibility of parole only after serving 30 years. The Celeste's parents drew attention to the fact that their daughter had reported the perpetrator to the police as early as 2020, seeking protection from him. However, her complaint was not accepted due to a loophole in the existing legislation. This led to calls for a change in the law, which would later be referred to as Celeste's Law. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Catherine Wells Burr. Catherine Wells Burr was born in 1989 in the United Kingdom to parents Phil and Jane Wells Burr. She has an older sister named Lynn. In the summer of 2010, Catherine met Rafael Novak, a 31-year-old co-worker, on a university break while working on a new vacuum cleaner production line. Rafael was an immigrant from Poland with a previous marriage and a son, had moved to England 4 years earlier seeking a better life. Rafael and Catherine started dating, initially meeting for lunch at the production site cafe, but soon progressing to romantic dinners. Rafael showered Catherine with gifts, took Catherine to movies, and went on walks with Catherine. As their relationship deepened, Rafael shared his past and reasons for moving to the UK with Catherine. Rafael's trustworthy nature allows her to open up completely to him. Within a few months, Catherine introduced Rafael to her parents, who welcomed him into their family and hoped for Rafael and Catherine's future happiness. Soon, Rafael and Catherine began planning their wedding. Catherine graduated with honors from Bath Spa University in 2011 and secured a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the manufacturer of Henry vacuum cleaners. Her career progressed quickly, helping her have good job opportunities. Catherine is smart, highly educated, and has good interaction skills with others. She shows genuine interest in her co-workers' problems and cares for those around her. Her kind demeanor and radiant smile have earned her the admiration of her colleagues, who view her as a young leader. Catherine's career was advancing swiftly, and her substantial earnings, combined with those of her partner Rafael, allowed them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace in Willow Way. Although they were financially secure, they opted to take out a mortgage, securing insurance coverage as per their agreement with the bank. With their youth, successful careers, and love for each other, it seemed they had all the ingredients for happiness. However, the fateful day of September 12, 2012, marked a turning point in their lives, changing everything forever. On September 12, 2012, Orlando, a local resident, was driving home after a night shift at the gas station. He is in a hurry to take his daughter Marietta to kindergarten as he promised his wife. While driving, he noticed black smoke coming from a nearby parking lot after turning a sharp corner. Smoke billowed from a car engulfed in flames. Orlando stopped and tried to get a closer look but couldn't due to the intense fire. When firefighters arrived 4 minutes later, the car was completely burned out. The police cordoned off the area to keep onlookers away. The location was relatively deserted due to the early hour, and there were no witnesses to the incident. Upon investigation, a charred body was found. The police needed to identify the victim and determine the cause of death. There were no signs of a car accident or any evidence of another vehicle being involved. The police initially suspected that the car may have caught fire due to a malfunction or self-ignition. A thorough investigation was conducted, involving multiple expert analyses. The remains were sent to a forensic laboratory to determine the identity and cause of death. The police also examined fragments of the burned vehicle to identify any malfunctions and establish the cause of the fire. The police began by checking the missing persons database and recent reports of disappearances. They quickly identified the deceased as 23-year-old Catherine Wells Barr. On the same day, Rafal Novak filed a missing persons report for his girlfriend, Catherine. According to Rafal, he left for work at 5:30 a.m. while Catherine was still asleep. When she failed to show up for work, and Rafal couldn't find her at any of her relatives' homes, he contacted the police. The investigation involved interviewing the victim's family, including her parents and sister, as well as Rafal, her colleagues, and friends. By gathering information about the last days and years of Catherine's life, the police were able to reconstruct the events leading up to her tragic death. The investigation into Catherine's disappearance continued to uncover shocking details about her life with Rafal. As the truth began to emerge, it became clear that their relationship had been built on lies from the start. Rafal, a 29-year-old man from Poland, had left his wife and child behind to escape his debts. He moved to the UK, where he met Anna Levick, with whom he had a long-term relationship starting in 2008. When Rafal met Catherine, he initially maintained relationships with both women. However, he eventually chose Catherine, believing she offered more stability and financial security. Catherine, unaware of Rafal's true intentions, genuinely desired a happy marriage and family with him. Meanwhile, Rafal was secretly planning to kill Catherine, intending to use the life insurance payout and the large house they shared to fund a new life with his mistress, Anna. The murder was carefully planned and executed with exceptional cruelty. On the day Catherine went missing, Rafal waited a few hours before reporting her disappearance to her boss, pretending to be frantically worried about her whereabouts. He feigned panic and despair in front of Catherine's colleagues and relatives, claiming she had been receiving threatening letters from a mentally unstable admirer. When Catherine's car was found missing and she was not at her parents' home or her own, Rafal's fake concern led Catherine's family to contact the police. Rafal recounted that the evening before her disappearance had been normal evening. Rafal and Catherine went for a walk, bought groceries, had dinner, watched TV, and went to bed together. Catherine seemed calm. However, a thorough investigation revealed that her death occurred earlier. She was strangled around 2 a.m., likely in her own bed while asleep. Her body was placed in the car, driven a short distance, and set on fire to destroy evidence. Rafal Novak had a solid alibi, as he was at work from 5:30 a.m. He claimed Catherine was asleep in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m. However, Rafal was still at home at 1:30 a.m., which significantly altered the case's direction. As a result, Rafal Novak became the prime suspect in Catherine Wells Barr's murder. The evidence allowed for Rafal to be detained pending further investigation. Rafal claimed that Catherine was being stalked, which had caused her significant distress. However, during the investigation, it was discovered that Catherine had a secret online life. She had accounts on several adult websites, where she shared intimate photos and engaged in flirtatious conversations with men. A letter from a secret admirer was also found. Despite attempts to mislead the investigation, evidence was uncovered that proved Roffel's direct involvement in Catherine's demise. Notably, Roffel had a motive to kill Catherine. Investigators found that he had been in continuous communication with Anna Legwinowicz, and they had met regularly over the past few months. Furthermore, it was discovered that Roffel had a financial motive. Shortly before Catherine's death, they had both taken out life insurance policies worth £123,000. Roffel and Catherine were the sole beneficiaries of each other's policies, meaning they would receive the payouts in the event of the other's death. The main motive behind Catherine's death and the burning of her car to mislead the investigation was found to be a large life insurance payout. On the day she went missing, Catherine sent a message to Anna's phone. Additionally, security cameras showed Anna and her uncle filling a gas can at a gas station a few days before the crime. This new information brought a third person into the investigation. Anna Legwinowicz, 32, and her uncle, Tadeusz Dimitricin, 38, along with Roffel Novak, are suspected of being accomplices in a premeditated crime and arson to cover up evidence. The crime was carefully planned by them over several months. They created accounts on adult websites, uploaded doctored images of Catherine, and created chats with various men to mislead the investigation. When faced with undeniable evidence, Roffel and Anna couldn't deny their involvement any longer and began blaming each other. Roffel claimed that Anna, driven by jealousy, planned and carried out the crime to eliminate Catherine. In contrast, Anna accused Roffel of committing the crime out of greed, seeking to secure the insurance payout for the house. To avoid detection, the conspirators forged much evidence related to Catherine. They created fake profiles about Catherine on dating websites, portraying her as a promiscuous and highly sexual woman. Also, to cover their tracks, the conspirators burned Catherine's body and created a fake story about her. They invented a fictitious lover, and they believed that he might be responsible for Catherine's death. One of the conspirators even sent a text message from Catherine's phone to this fictitious person, suggesting that she was on her way to meet him. However, forensic experts discovered that when the fire broke out, Catherine was only wearing her favorite nightgown, not an appropriate outfit to meet someone. Despite the evidence, Roffel refused to acknowledge his involvement in Catherine's death. Instead, he told Jane, Catherine's mother, that her daughter was receiving threatening emails and text messages from an ex-boyfriend who said if he couldn't have her, no one could. Roffel also claimed that Catherine had spoken of taking her own life. In a shocking display of deceit, Roffel allowed Catherine's parents to comfort him, believing he was also mourning the loss of Catherine he loved. Roffel's acting was incredibly convincing. After Catherine's death, her mother, Jane, was so taken in by his performance that she hugged him and allowed him to call her mom. Jane explained that in the early stages of the investigation, the police viewed Roffel more as a witness than a suspect, so she decided to offer him her full support. Her reasoning was that if Catherine had loved him that much and he was considered part of their family, then he deserved their support. The trial, chaired by Justice Sharp, began and the jury heard that Roffel and his two co-defendants stood to gain a significant amount from Catherine's death. They hoped to receive a life insurance payout of £123,000 and half ownership of a two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000. During the trial, it was revealed that when police found Catherine's body in her burned car on the morning of September 12, Roffel showed no emotion. Anna Legwinowicz frequently shook her head and laughed in court when it was suggested she was responsible for the crime, but refused to testify. Tadeusz also chose not to testify in his defense. The judge, Justice Sharp, told the defendants the murder was a horrific and merciless crime. The defendants showed no emotion during sentencing. The judge described Anna Legwinowicz's behavior as deceitful, manipulative, and cruel, and stated she played a significant role in the crime. He also told Tadevs that the murder was committed for gain, with many aggravating circumstances and no mitigating ones. The judge expressed deep sympathy for Catherine's parents, who had no idea that Rafal Novak's charming facade hid a monster. Rafal's actions were driven by financial gain, as he had no emotional ties to Catherine. Catherine's mother stated that the brutal and calculated manner of her daughter's death would haunt them forever. She regretted not having the chance to say goodbye or express her love, and now considers Rafal an evil person who deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. Catherine's father, Philip, added that they had welcomed Rafal into their home, treating him like a son, only to be betrayed by him. During the trial, Rafal Novak became emotional in the witness box. He denied any involvement in the death of his girlfriend, Catherine Wells-Burr. Rafal claimed everyone was blaming him for a crime he did not commit. However, the court heard that Rafal showed no emotion when the police discovered Catherine's body in her burned-out car on September 12 last year. Catherine's mother, Jane Wells-Burr, testified that after his initial release from police custody, Rafal asked for a steak dinner and didn't even mention Catherine. Jane Wells-Burr stated that her daughter's fate was sealed when she and Rafal bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy. She believes that in signing the contract, Catherine also signed her own death warrant. Ultimately, the court found Rafal Novak guilty of suffocating Catherine with a pillow while she slept. He had conspired with his secret lover, Anna Legwinowicz, and her uncle, Tadevs, to claim a £123,000 life insurance payout and a share of the house. Anna and Tadevs had transported Catherine's body in her car to a remote location and set it on fire. Rafal and Anna were sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 32 years, while Tadevs received a 27-year sentence. After the verdict, Catherine's parents, Philip and Jane Wells-Burr, advocated for stricter immigration laws. They believed that if the UK had more stringent immigration rules, like the US, Rafal Novak would not have been allowed entry. Rafal had previously been convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland. Philip and Jane, who divorced after Catherine's death, blamed the European Union for the UK's lenient immigration policies. Jane stated that the UK does not thoroughly check people entering the country. She was unaware of Rafal's previous assault charge in Poland and believes the government needs to prevent individuals like Rafal from freely entering the country. Following the verdict, Catherine's mother paid tribute to her daughter, describing her as a beautiful, determined, and hard-working individual who earned a first-class degree from the University of Bath Spa. Catherine's family expressed their devastation and loss, stating they were proud of her accomplishments and had no idea how to move forward without her. They believed she had great potential and a promising life ahead, but it was cruelly taken away from her and her loved ones. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Michelle Young. Jason Young was born in 1974 in Brevard, North Carolina. Jason grew up in a typical family. After completing high school, he attended the prestigious State University in Raleigh, the state capital. Following graduation, he secured a job as a salesman at a large retail chain. Jason proved to be a valuable and reliable employee, but his friends described him as inconsistent and unpredictable in his relationships with women. He had a reputation for being a womanizer, often changing partners. Michelle Young was born in February 1977 in New York. She was raised in a close-knit family with her younger sister Meredith and their devoted mother Linda. Linda played a significant role in Michelle's early life, nurturing her passions and talents from a young age. Michelle's interests in law and economics were evident from her school days, and she dreamed of pursuing a career in this field. Michelle's academic journey led her to apply to several universities after high school, eventually gaining acceptance into a top university in North Carolina. There, she pursued her master's degree in economics. After completing her education, Michelle secured a prestigious job at a leading accounting firm in the state, rapidly establishing herself as a skilled professional. She achieved financial stability, was able to support herself fully. A chance encounter at a bar on Michelle's birthday, when Jason accidentally spilled a cocktail on her, he immediately apologized and offered to buy her another. This kind and thoughtful act caught Michelle's attention, and they began chatting. As they talked, they discovered that they had a lot in common. They both went to the same college, although Jason graduated 3 years earlier. Their casual conversation quickly turned into a romantic relationship, and they began dating. Although they had deep feelings for each other, they had no plans to get married or move in together. At the time, Jason still lived with his parents in Brevard, while Michelle lived in Raleigh. They would see each other on weekends or during Jason's business trips to Raleigh. During one of their meetings, Michelle dropped a bombshell: she was pregnant. This news came as a shock to both of them, as they were not yet ready to become parents. Jason and Michelle were young and focused on their careers, with no immediate plans to start a family. However, when Michelle became pregnant, she decided to keep the baby after some initial hesitation. Jason took a month to come to terms with the situation and then relocated to be closer to Michelle. After a few months, they got married, but it wasn't due to love or the pregnancy. Instead, it was because Michelle lacked health insurance, and the cost of childbirth would have been prohibitively expensive. Marriage provided a solution to this financial burden. Their daughter, Cassidy Elizabeth, was born in the spring of 2004. Michelle threw herself into domestic life and family responsibilities, with the help of her mother and younger sister. Although Michelle's family was wary of Jason, they tried to avoid conflicts and accepted him as part of their family. Later that year, the young family moved into a large house in a quiet neighborhood. Michelle's mother, Linda, came to visit to help with housework and noticed a tense atmosphere in the home. Jason had a bad temper and often started arguments. Michelle tried to downplay these incidents and appear cheerful. However, she confirmed with her mother the true state of their relationship, which seemed ominous. When Cassidy was just 2 years old, Michelle found out she was pregnant again. She was nervous about sharing the news with her husband, but he took it calmly and even seemed happy. The family decided to visit Jason's parents in Brevard to share the news in person. They spent the weekend celebrating with relatives, and on Monday they left Cassidy with the grandparents for a few hours and went out to dinner to celebrate the event. As they were driving home, Jason, who was driving, overturned and the car went off the road into a ravine. They were left very frightened with a few scrapes and bruises, but their lives were not in danger. However, Michelle had suffered a miscarriage, so Michelle was very worried. Jason was surprisingly calm about the accident. Before the accident, during a business trip, Jason met an old college friend, Michelle Money. She had the same name as Jason's wife, Michelle. Jason told his wife about it. They decided to invite Michelle Money to visit their home, and she agreed. During her visit, Michelle Money began to complain about her unhappy family life. At the same time, Michelle Money kept complimenting Jason and telling his wife that she was lucky to be pregnant. Michelle was not worried about Michelle Money's behavior, but she genuinely wanted to comfort her friend. Jason and Michelle Money began calling each other every day and secretly meeting each other. Jason always justified his absence with business trips, and his wife could not guess anything. Things got complicated in the summer of 2006, when Michelle found out she was pregnant. Unlike her previous pregnancies, Jason's reaction was unhappy and cold. Michelle attributed his sadness to her previous miscarriage, still not knowing the real reason for his cold behavior. In November, with Michelle 5 months pregnant, Jason embarked on a 300-mile business trip. Michelle, who was pregnant, had a lengthy phone conversation with her best friend, discussing family problems and a heated argument she had with her husband the previous night. After the call, her husband left. Jason embarked on a 300-mile business trip. Around 10 p.m., Jason arrived at a hotel, claiming fatigue from his journey. However, instead of resting, he began to carefully examine the hotel's entrances, exits, and security cameras, planning a way to leave and return undetected. He was creating a solid alibi for a crime he intended to commit. Early the next morning, Jason calls Meredith and asks for her help. He tells her that he wants to surprise his wife with a piece of jewelry for their anniversary but accidentally sent the order confirmation to their home fax machine. Jason is worried that Michelle will see the gift and ruin the surprise. Even though Meredith doesn't like Jason, she agrees to help him. Meredith arrived at her sister's house, using a secret door in the garage that only family members knew about and that was always left unlocked. The house was unusually quiet, but Michelle's keys, wallet, and important papers were still in the hallway, suggesting she hadn't left the premises. When Meredith went upstairs, she found the bedroom door wide open, but neither Michelle nor her daughter responded to her calls. When she entered the room, Meredith was met with a horrific scene. Michelle lay on the floor by the bed, her skull fractured and her body surrounded by a large pool of blood. The walls, furniture, and floor were all stained with blood, and tiny footprints were visible next to the body. Sadly, Michelle had been dead for hours. As Meredith rushed to call 911, she heard a faint noise coming from under the bed. When she looked back, she saw Michelle's young daughter, Cassidy, looking at her with a confused expression. Cassidy was unharmed. The little girl had witnessed her mother's brutal death and had spent many hours by her side. A forensic examination of Michelle's body later revealed a series of bruises, abrasions, and broken bones. Her teeth had been broken, and her skull had been fractured by a heavy object. A bloody pillow was found next to her body, with marks suggesting she had been suffocated by the pillow. The murder investigation revealed some crucial facts. First, nothing was stolen from the house, indicating that the killer's sole intention was to murder the Michelle. Furthermore, there were no signs of forced entry or broken locks, suggesting that the perpetrator had a key or knew about a secret door that only family members were aware of. Normally, Jason would be the prime suspect, but in this case, Jason seemed to have a solid alibi. He claimed to have checked into the hotel and not left until the morning, then attended a business meeting. Hotel records confirmed that he used a key card to enter and exit the room. However, upon closer inspection, investigators discovered several irregularities in Jason's alibi. A hotel employee found the fire escape open and propped up with a rock. When investigators reviewed surveillance footage to determine who had propped up the rock, they discovered that the camera had been deliberately disabled on the night of the murder. Jason's room was last recorded about half an hour after he checked in. The strange events continued. Later that night, a man resembling Jason stopped at a gas station between the hotel and the crime scene. When asked to show identification as required by the station's rules, he refused, paid with cash, and hastily left without waiting for his change. The on-call attendant identified Jason, but he denied any involvement, claiming that he had spent the night in the hotel room. His actions, however, raised suspicion. On the day before the tragedy, Jason had made more than 24 calls to his wife, Michelle, and 5 more to his mistress, Michelle Money, each lasting less than 15 seconds, suggesting he was in a state of panic. Notably, these calls were made outside the hotel, contradicting his claim that he had been in the room all night. Additionally, Jason was late for a scheduled business meeting with his partners and appeared distracted. While these incidents were suspicious, they did not prove his guilt, so Jason was able to maintain his normal life for nearly 3 years. He even won custody of his young daughter, which was a huge blow to Michelle's family. Jason's case was reopened in 2012 with new evidence. Witnesses reported seeing his distinctive white car near his home on the night of the murders. A child psychologist testified about Jason's daughter reenacting a disturbing scene with her doll. And Jason's former mistress Michelle Money revealed Jason's mood swings and violent outbursts, and that he had confided in her about his marital woes. This testimony helped convict Jason of brutally assaulting his pregnant wife, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. As a result of Jason's actions, his daughter, Cassidy, was left without parents. Her mother was murdered, and her father is in prison for the crime. Cassidy is now being cared for by her aunt and maternal grandparents.